I ran without knowing where I was going, only away from the noise, the anger, the shouting, the heavy weight of a life that squeezed tight around my ribs. The city behind me faded into a blur of dim streetlights and shuttered windows, a world I no longer belonged to. My feet carried me to the edge of everything familiar, to streets that twisted like forgotten riddles. Then, there it was, the sleeping library. It wasn't on any map, and no one spoke of it in the daylight. A building swallowed by shadow and time, its facade cracked and worn, vines curling like dark fingers along its walls. The heavy door loomed before me, carved with symbols I half recognized but couldn't name. The air smelled of dust and rain, of secrets trapped beneath layers of silence. I hesitated, breath caught in my throat. The city's chaos was a distant roar behind me, but here, in this place, the world seemed to hold its breath. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open. It creaked, a sound like a sigh escaping after centuries of sleep. Inside, the library stretched endlessly, a cathedral of shadows and whispered stories. Shelves towered high above, laden with books whose spines were cracked and faded, some bound in leather, others in strange materials that seemed to pulse faintly under my gaze. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, ink, and something undefinable, like the echo of dreams long forgotten. I stepped cautiously forward, every footfall swallowed by the heavy silence. It was as if the building itself was alive, breathing softly around me. My fingers brushed over the spines, tracing titles that flickered and shifted, impossible to read fully. Then, a whisper, a thread of sound almost beneath hearing, like the sigh of a soul caught between waking and sleep. Curiosity pulled me deeper. I found a small table nestled between two towering stacks and laid a book open. The pages shimmered, and suddenly the room melted away. I stood in a place that was not a place, a dream realm woven from mist and light, where colors sang softly and the air thrummed with ancient knowledge. I saw faces ghostly, beautiful, and sad trapped within the pages, each one a soul dreaming, waiting. Then the weight hit me, a hollow ache in my chest, a slow, creeping chill that wrapped around my heart. I blinked and was back in the library, the book resting quietly on the table. But I knew something had changed. Time had slipped from me, a year stolen in the crossing between worlds. Fear and wonder tangled within me. This place was sanctuary and prison both. The books held souls, dreaming and bound, and to touch their stories was to pay a price I wasn't sure I could afford. I sank into a shadowed corner, the silence pressing close. Outside, the city lights flickered, distant and unreachable. Here, in the sleeping library, I was alone but not lonely. The voices whispered, the books breathed, and the night held me in its quiet embrace. I didn't know what awaited me beyond the next page, but I knew I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The library had claimed me, and I was both frightened and strangely comforted by the weight of its secrets. And so, with trembling hands and a heart full of questions, I opened another book. The journey had begun. The air was thick with dust and magic, the faint scent of aged parchment mingling with something more elusive, something alive. I moved cautiously, fingers brushing spines worn smooth by countless hands, my heart pounding in a strange rhythm that seemed to echo the library's breath. I reached out toward a leather-bound tome, its surface cracked and dark as though it had weathered centuries. The title was embossed in faded silver, unreadable at first glance. My fingers trembled. I hesitated, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Then, with a deep breath, I pried it open. The moment the pages parted, the world shifted. Colors bloomed like oil on water, swirling in impossible patterns around me. The cool air thickened, and the scent of ink morphed into something richer, deeper, like the scent of dreams themselves. My feet left the wooden floor, and I was pulled forward, falling through layers of shadow and light. I landed in a place both alien and familiar. The sky above was not sky, but a shifting tapestry of symbols and whispers, glowing softly in shades of violet and emerald. Around me, the ground rippled like liquid glass, reflecting fragments of distant memories and lost knowledge. Figures floated nearby, translucent, shimmering forms with eyes that held endless sorrow and longing. They whispered in voices that danced just beyond comprehension, telling stories that felt like echoes of my own heart. I reached out to one, a woman whose face was blurred yet hauntingly beautiful. She smiled sadly, and I felt a coldness coil in my chest. Time here was different. Each breath seemed to stretch and contract, and I became painfully aware of a slow, steady drain like invisible threads pulling at the edges of my life. Suddenly, the dreamscape shifted again, and I was back in the library. The tome closed gently on my lap. The room was silent, but the weight of what I had experienced settled heavily upon me. I pressed my hands to my chest, feeling the faint pulse of something lost. A soft glow caught my eye. From the shadows emerged a figure, pale and shimmering, her robes flowing like liquid moonlight. She moved with a grace that seemed both delicate and unyielding, her eyes deep pools of ancient wisdom. "You have opened a door," she said, her voice a hush that seemed to vibrate through the air, "and with it, you have traded a piece of your own time." I blinked, searching her face. "Who are you?" "I am Eleanor," she replied, "a guardian of this place and a soul bound to its pages." Her presence was comforting yet filled with sorrow. "Why does it take so much? Why does each book cost me a year?" She looked away, her gaze distant. "The library is a sanctuary, but also a prison. The souls within these books are caught between dreams and waking, bound by enchantments older than memory. To enter their world is to share their burden." I swallowed hard, the enormity of it settling in. But why me? Why was I drawn here? "Because you sought refuge," Eleanor said softly. "And sometimes, refuge demands a price." I turned back to the shelves, suddenly aware of the countless lives sleeping within. Each book was a whisper, a heartbeat frozen in time, waiting to be heard. The library was alive, breathing with secrets and sacrifices. Days passed, or perhaps only moments, time now a fragile thread. I found myself drawn again to the books, unable to resist the lure of the dream realms and the knowledge they held. Each time I opened a tome, I felt the invisible toll, the slow ebbing of my years. Eleanor appeared often, offering riddles and warnings. "Beware the hunger for knowledge that blinds you to cost," she said once, her voice tinged with melancholy. "It is a delicate balance you must learn to walk." I listened, but the ache inside me was both a warning and a promise. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of the library, I could escape the noise of my past. Yet, with every page, I became more entwined in the library's magic and its price. One afternoon, as the light filtered through stained glass, casting fractured rainbows across the worn wooden floor, I sat alone at a heavy table. The weight of solitude pressed down on me, mingling with the library's whispering secrets. I traced the edges of a book, feeling the rough leather under my fingertips, and wondered how much of myself I was willing to surrender. The voices from the dreaming souls called softly, a lullaby of forgotten hopes and warnings. And as I closed my eyes, I realized the sanctuary I sought was also a trap, one built from longing, sacrifice, and the fragile hope of belonging. But even as fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve, I knew I could not turn away. For the first time in a long while, the library offered more than silence it, offered a chance to be seen, to be heard, to dream. And so I opened another book. The sleeping library seemed to breathe around me, its ancient shelves stretching endlessly upward, filled with tomes that whispered their secrets in voices too delicate to catch fully. I clutched the leather-bound book I had found tucked away in a shadowed nook, its cover worn and cracked, the gold-embossed letters shimmering faintly in the dim light. The weight in my chest was heavier than ever. The price I had just learned to pay was no longer a distant threat, but a tangible cost I felt with every breath. Each time I opened a book, a year slipped away from the fragile thread of my life. I had to be cautious now, more than ever. But the pull of the library's magic was irresistible, and curiosity gnawed at the edges of my fear. I settled onto a bench near the end of the aisle and carefully opened the tome. The pages rustled softly, like the sigh of a sleeping creature stirred from dreams. Golden script danced before my eyes, weaving words that shimmered and flowed like liquid light. Slowly, the air around me thickened, and the world blurred at the edges. The library faded, replaced by a shifting dreamscape where shadows and memories tangled like vines. A sudden movement caught the corner of my vision. From the depths of the book's shimmering pages, a figure emerged, a young woman with dark, curly hair that tumbled wildly around her shoulders. Eyes sharp and restless, burning with a fierce light that unsettled me. Her voice broke the quiet, sharp as a slashing wind. "You don't belong here," she said, pacing the narrow space between the shelves, her tone equal parts challenge and warning. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering. "Neither do you," I replied cautiously. She stopped and fixed me with a piercing gaze. "I'm Tamsin," she said, "and I've been trapped in this place longer than you can imagine. The library isn't sanctuary, it's a prison. Every book is a cage, every word a binding." Her words cut through the haze of my thoughts, stirring a storm of questions and fears. The weight of the year I had lost pressed against my lungs, a silent reminder of the price I was paying to be here. "Why, tell me this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're not like the others," she said, stepping closer, her eyes searching mine. "You hesitate. You fear what this place demands. But you need to understand, if you want to survive, if you want to protect what's hidden here, you have to face the truth." Together, we stepped deeper into the dream realm conjured by the book. The space around us morphed into endless corridors, veiled in mist, with faint echoes of voices and memories that seemed to reach for us, desperate and distant. The air was thick with sorrow and longing, the weight of countless souls bound and silenced within the pages. Tamsin's voice was urgent. "The bindings are stronger than you know. They aren't just spells, they're curses woven from sacrifice and despair. The Curator holds the keys, and his grip tightens every day." I swallowed my rising panic. "Is there a way out?" She shook her head, her expression hardening. "Not without cost, not without risking everything." The dreamscape flickered and shifted, threatening to swallow us in shadows. I reached out, gripping Tamsin's hand, feeling the tremor of resolve beneath her restless energy. When I finally closed the book, the library's quiet embrace returned. The ache inside me was sharper now, a reminder of the year that had slipped away without my permission. But beneath the weight, there was a flicker of something new, hope tempered with caution, a fragile alliance born from shared pain. "We're bound together now," Tamsin said softly. "Whether you like it or not." I met her gaze, a silent promise passing between us. "No matter the cost, I would face the library's secrets. I would learn its true nature. And I would fight to protect the souls trapped within Evan if it meant sacrificing more of myself. Because some prisons were made of dreams, and some dreams came with a price. And I was no longer willing to run from either. Her pale blue shimmer pulsed gently, as if breathing with the library itself. "Come," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of leaves in a distant forest. "There are histories here that only the dreaming realms can reveal." I nodded, the weight of years I had already lost pressing on my chest, but curiosity and something like hope stirring beneath it. We stepped through a veil of iridescent mist, and the world melted away into a sprawling dreamscape. It was a realm of soft luminescence and shifting shapes, where glowing runes danced like fireflies and whispered fragments of forgotten knowledge drifted through the heavy air. The dream realm was unlike anything I had seen before. It was not merely a place, but a living memory, layered in the echoes of countless souls bound to the library's ancient magic. As Eleanor guided me deeper, visions began to unfold, shards of a story written long before I ever found refuge here. I saw a gathering of scholars, cloaked and solemn, poring over arcane texts beneath vaulted ceilings painted with stars. Their faces were etched with both determination and desperation. They sought to harness knowledge beyond the reach of the ordinary world, to grasp secrets that could change the fabric of reality itself. But such power demanded a price. One by one, these scholars made sacrifices, offering years of their lives, their memories, even their very souls in exchange for glimpses of forbidden knowledge. Their spirits, tethered by intricate bindings, became the dreaming souls trapped within the library's countless tomes. The books themselves pulsed softly, as if alive, each heartbeat resonating with the slumbering essence contained inside. Eleanor's voice wove through the visions. "The bindings were meant as protection and preservation," she explained, "a way to keep knowledge safe from those who would misuse it. But in their creation, a curse was born, a prison from which few can escape." I felt a pang deep within me, a sorrow mingled with awe. These souls were not mere stories. They were lives paused, suspended between waking and dreaming. They longed for freedom, yet their captivity had become the very foundation of this sanctuary. As we moved through the shifting dreamscape, the colors darkened, shadows pooling like ink in the corners of my vision. The ache of the trapped souls grew palpable, their silent pleas brushing against my skin like a chill wind. I could feel their yearning, their hope, and their despair intertwining with my own. "Why do you show me this?" I asked Eleanor, my voice trembling. She looked at me with eyes that shimmered like starlight. "Because you are part of this story now, Liora. The library has chosen you as its keeper, but the choice is not without consequence. To protect these souls, to preserve their knowledge, you must understand the sacrifices that bind them. Only then can you hope to find a way to break the curse without losing yourself." The weight of her words settled on me like a shroud. I thought of the years I had already spent here, the ones slipping away with every page I turned, and the faces of the souls I had glimpsed, so many caught in endless sleep. The library was not just a refuge, it was a prison forged from hope and sacrifice. Yet amid the melancholia, a fierce determination began to kindle. If these souls could endure their bindings, if Eleanor's wisdom could guide me, perhaps there was a path forward. A way to honor the sacrifices without becoming another lost year in the library's endless stacks. The dream realm began to dissolve, the glowing runes fading like dying embers as Eleanor's form softened into mist. "Remember," she said gently, "every choice has a cost, but some sacrifices are made for freedom." I awoke back in the library's dim light, the scent of ancient paper and dust heavy in the air. The weight of the dream realm lingered, a bittersweet echo in my heart. I ran my fingers over the spine of the book I had just closed and wondered if the knowledge I had gained would be enough. Outside, the library stood silent and waiting, its secrets still whispering in the shadows. And I was caught between two worlds, the waking and the dreaming, the past and the future, the price of knowledge and the hope of freedom. I took a breath, steadying myself. There was no turning back now. The journey was only beginning. I had been wandering the aisles for what felt like hours, though time here was slippery, measured less by clocks and more by the shifting weight of the knowledge pressing in on me. The faint light filtering through the stained glass windows cast kaleidoscopic patterns on the walls. But even the colors seemed muted, as if subdued by a quiet dread. I paused before a shelf lined with books bound in cracked leather, their spines worn by centuries of touch. The scent of old paper was sharp and bittersweet, mingled with something darker, faint metallic Thames that made my skin prickle. I reached out to brush my fingers over a tome etched with strange runes, but before I could open it, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't the usual chill that accompanied the magic here. This was something colder, more deliberate. A whisper brushed my ear, too soft to catch the words, but heavy with meaning. I spun around, heart hammering, but the aisle was empty. The shadows between the stacks seemed to ripple, bending and twisting as if alive. The silence pressed against me, thick and suffocating. "Do not linger here," a voice said, low and resonant, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. Before I could respond, a figure materialized in the gloom at the far end of the aisle. Tall and gaunt, cloaked in robes darker than the shadows themselves, he stood still as a statue. His eyes glowed faintly, ember-like, piercing the dimness with a gaze that felt like it could unravel the very fabric of my being. The library seemed to recoil in his presence. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. I swallowed hard, the weight of his stare settling like iron chains around my chest. I wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I took a hesitant step back, tracing my path through the labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. The figure did not pursue me, but I knew he was watching, always watching. I had heard whispers from the dreaming souls before tales of a master who ruled the library's depths with an iron will, a keeper of secrets who hoarded the magic for himself. Now, I had seen him. Later, in the solitude of a quiet alcove, Eleanor appeared. Her translucent form shimmered softly, a pale blue light that seemed to push back the shadows just enough to breathe. "You have felt his presence," she said gently, her voice like a breeze through leaves. "The Curator watches all who enter. He is the guardian and the jailer, bound to this place by his own ambition. Why does he keep the souls trapped?" I asked, my fingers trembling as I traced the delicate edges of a nearby book. Eleanor's eyes were sorrowful. "He fears what freedom might bring. The knowledge here is power, but it comes with a price. The Curator believes that by controlling the magic, he preserves it. But in truth, he has become its prisoner as much as the souls he holds captive." I wanted to understand, to find a way to bargain or reason with him. But the truth was darker. The Curator embodied the very cost of obsession, the sacrifice of compassion for control. That night, I found myself drawn again to the shelves, unable to resist the pull. I selected a book, the leather cold beneath my fingers, and carefully opened it. The world around me dissolved into swirling mists and shifting shapes, a dream realm unlike any I had seen. Forgotten knowledge bloomed in vivid colors, memories of lives long lost, and secrets whispered on the wind. But as the visions unfolded, I felt it the tug at my soul, the invisible thread being pulled. A year of my life slipped away, as it always did. Around me, the shadows deepened, thickening like ink spilled across the pages. The curator's presence was a tightening noose, a silent warning. I closed the book with a snap, breath ragged. The room settled back into the dim quiet of the library, but I knew the balance was shifting. The curator's shadow was spreading, threading itself through every corner, every dream. I was caught between sanctuary and prison, knowledge and sacrifice, and the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. Yet, despite the fear, I could not turn away. The library held the answers I sought, but at what cost? That was a question I could no longer ignore. As I moved deeper into the stacks, the whispered warning echoed in my mind. Do not linger here. But I had no choice. The library was alive, and it had chosen me, and in its heart, the curator waited. I moved cautiously between the towering shelves, fingertips brushing spines that shimmered faintly in the dim light, each tome humming with the quiet pulse of dreaming souls. My footsteps echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the vastness, and the silence pressed in, heavy and watchful. It was then, in a shadowed alcove where the light seemed to falter, that I first noticed him. A small black cat, sleek and silent, sat poised on the edge of a low shelf. His fur was so dark it absorbed the scattered glimmers of light, and his eyes glowed an uncanny green, like twin lanterns set against the gloom. For a moment, I froze, caught between fear and fascination. In all my time here, the library had felt like a place where nothing truly lived, only the echoes of souls trapped in pages. Yet here he was, alive and watching. "Hello," I whispered hesitantly, unsure if I was speaking aloud or into my own mind. The cat blinked slowly, then, with a grace that seemed almost deliberate, padded closer. His movements were fluid, silent as the turning of a page, and before I could think better of it, he brushed against my ankle. The touch was light but grounding, a reminder that some fragments of the world I'd fled still lingered here. I knelt down, reaching out a tentative hand. Milo, though I had no idea if that was his name, responded by rubbing his head against my fingers. His fur was soft, warm, a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been craving. In this place of shadows and suspended time, his presence felt like a tether, a fragile connection to something real and alive. Days passed, and Milo became my silent companion. He followed me through the labyrinthine stacks, weaving between my legs as I pored over books and stepped cautiously into dream realms. Often, when the weight of the library's enchantments pressed too heavily on my chest, his gentle purring would ripple through the still air, a balm to my restless mind. But Milo was no ordinary cat. I noticed the subtle ways he responded to the library's magic, his eyes flashing bright when shadows twisted unnaturally, ears twitching at sounds no one else could hear. Once, when a dream guardian prowled too close, Milo stood his ground, fur bristling, gaze unflinching. It was as if he belonged here in a way I could not yet understand, a guardian of his own kind. One evening, as I sat curled on the floor near an ancient oak table, the library's silence broken only by the soft rustle of turning pages, Milo leaped up beside me, his green eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that startled me. "What are you?" I breathed, half to myself. He blinked slowly, then nudged a small worn book toward me. The cover was embossed with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the gloom. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, the familiar tug of magic whispering through the air. As I opened the tome, a rush of images flooded my mind, fragments of the library's past, hidden corridors of knowledge, and the quiet watchfulness of a guardian unseen. Milo's presence anchored me through the flood, a steadfast reminder that I was not alone. The library was alive in ways I had never imagined, and Milo was a part of its beating heart. With him at my side, the oppressive silence no longer felt like a cage, but a place where I might find strength to face the shadows ahead. Yet questions lingered, unwelcome and persistent. What price did Milo pay to remain here? Was he a guardian sent to watch over the dreaming souls, or something else entirely, something born of the library's magic itself? And could I trust him, this quiet sentinel with eyes like emerald flames? Night deepened around me as I closed the book, Milo curling into my lap, his steady purring a lullaby against the encroaching darkness. The library awaited, vast and inscrutable, and I felt the first real flicker of hope since my arrival. Maybe, with Milo's watchful eyes upon me, I could unravel the mysteries that bound this place and perhaps, one day, find a way to escape its grasp without losing myself. But the shadows were never far behind, and the Curator's influence crept ever closer, like a cold breath against the back of my neck. The journey had only just begun, and the cost of knowledge was still to be paid. I looked down at Milo, his gaze calm and knowing. Together, we would face whatever dreams and nightmares awaited us in the heart of the sleeping library. And with that thought, I turned the page, ready to step deeper into the unknown. It hummed with a strange energy, a melody of memories, half forgotten and aching to be heard. The dust motes danced in the muted light, swirling like tiny stars caught in a slow spiral. The walls around me seemed alive, breathing faint whispers that tugged at the corners of my mind. Here, in this dream realm conjured by the library's restless magic, the past was no longer locked away but laid bare. I stepped forward hesitantly, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, louder than the soft rustle of pages turning somewhere beyond the mist. Shapes coalesced from the shadows, faint outlines of a house I once knew. The skeletal frame of an old oak tree bending under the weight of rain, the sharp scent of damp earth and wood smoke filling the air. The memories flickered like candle flames, fragile and trembling. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the intangible forms, and a pang of sorrow tightened around my chest. The place was both familiar and strange, the echo of laughter that never quite reached my ears, the sharp sting of silence that had chased me away. I saw myself there, a smaller version, eyes wide with confusion and fear, shoulders hunched beneath burdens too heavy for a child to bear. The shadows deepened, twisting into darker shapes, memories I had buried beneath layers of forgetfulness, faces blurred with tears, voices raised in anger, the sudden shattering of glass fragments of a life I had fled, now demanding acknowledgement. A soft light shimmered beside me, and Eleanor materialized like a ripple in the mist. Her pale blue robes flowed as though underwater, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. "The past is a tether," she said, her voice a gentle murmur woven with sadness, "but it need not be a chain. You must face what lies within to find the strength to move beyond." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat stubborn and unyielding. But what if I can't? What if it breaks me? Eleanor's gaze did not waver. Sometimes, to be whole, we must first be broken. Her words were both a comfort and a challenge. I wanted to turn away, to retreat into the safe shadows of the library's silent halls, but something in her presence steadied me. I took a breath and stepped deeper into the labyrinth of memories. The air thickened, the whispers growing louder, until they formed a chorus of voices I could almost understand. Suddenly, the shadows parted to reveal a figure cloaked in darkness, an embodiment of my past fears and pain. Its eyes were hollow voids, and its presence prickled the skin like icy needles. My breath hitched. Before I could falter, Tamsin appeared, her dark curls wild and eyes blazing with fierce defiance. "You don't have to run from this," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Stand your ground, fight." I glanced at her, surprised by the fire burning within those restless eyes. She was a soul trapped like me, yet her spirit roared with a strength I had yet to find. Together, we faced the shadow, and though my legs trembled, I did not step back. The darkness recoiled, hissing like a wounded beast, and the grip of old wounds loosened. Eleanor's voice echoed softly, "Healing begins when the shadow meets the light." After what felt like hours or perhaps moments lost in the folds of time, the dreamscape began to dissolve, the mist thinning until I found myself back in the library's hall. The familiar scent of aged parchment and polished wood grounded me. Milo wove between my feet, his fur warm and real against my trembling hands. His quiet purr was a balm to the turmoil swirling inside me. For the first time since I had fled my past, I felt a fragile thread of hope. The library was more than a prison or a refuge. It was a place where broken souls, including my own, might find a way to mend. The journey would be long and the cost steep, but perhaps I was not as alone as I had feared. I looked up at the towering shelves, their silent whispers no longer just echoes of forgotten knowledge, but voices of lives waiting to be understood and set free. My fingers brushed the spine of a nearby book, and though the familiar ache of time slipping away tugged at me, I felt ready to face whatever dreams and memories the library held. And as the lanterns flickered softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls, I knew there was no turning back. The past had found me, and I would meet it with open eyes and a heart willing to heal. But the library held more secrets, and the shadows were stirring. Somewhere beyond the stillness, the Curator watched, waiting for the moment when the delicate balance would tip. My path was set, and the echoes of my past would guide me or consume me. The air was thick with the scent of ancient parchment and something more elusive, an undercurrent of power that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the stillness. Tamsin's restless footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor, each step a challenge thrown at the suffocating silence that had settled since I first arrived. "You're moving too slowly," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "We can't just sit here waiting for the curse to claim more of you. We have to act." I hesitated, fingers trembling as they brushed against the spine of a tome that hummed faintly beneath my touch. The cost was always there, a shadow trailing every choice I made. 1 year of life gone with every page I opened, every dream realm I entered. But Tamsin's urgency was contagious, a spark in the vast dark that threatened to consume me. Together, we slipped into the dreamscape, the world shifting and folding around us like a living tapestry. Colors bled into one another, and the air vibrated with a strange, electric tension. We stood before a towering bookcase, ancient and worn, its shelves lined with bindings that shimmered with an otherworldly light. "These bindings," Tamsin murmured, tracing a finger along the glowing threads that wove through the spines, "are the chains that hold us here. If we can unravel them, maybe we can break free." I swallowed hard, the gravity of her words pressing down like the weight of the library itself. "But the cost is already paid," she snapped, eyes blazing. "Every day trapped here is a year lost anyway. We either fight or fade away." With a deep breath, I nodded. We reached out, our hands weaving through the shimmering threads, testing the strength of the enchantment. The bindings resisted, tightening like a living thing, and a cold rush surged through me, prickling beneath my skin. The dreamscape flickered, shadows dancing at the edges of my vision. "It's fighting back," I whispered, heart pounding. Tamsin's grip hardened. "Good. That means it's not unbreakable." We worked together, unraveling threads here, tugging loose a knot there. Each success was a fragile victory, but the library was watching its silence, growing heavier, more oppressive. The magic that had once felt like a refuge was now a cage tightening around us. "You can't keep being so cautious," Tamsin said during a rare moment of stillness, frustration lacing her tone. "If we don't push, we'll never get out." I met her fierce gaze, the fire in her eyes a mirror to my own fear and hope. "And if we push too hard," her laugh was bitter, "then we break something. Maybe even ourselves." The tension between us thrummed like a live wire, a clash of desperation and determination. But beneath it all was something fragiler, bond forged from shared imprisonment and the dream of freedom. Suddenly, a thread snapped beneath my fingers, and a sliver of light pierced the gloom. The bindings shuddered, revealing a glimpse of possibility, a crack in the curse. "We did it," I breathed, heart leaping, but the triumph was fleeting. The dreamscape rippled with a mournful sigh, and I felt the familiar, aching drain deep within me. The price of our defiance was steep, already etched into the dwindling years I carried like a hidden wound. Tamsin's eyes softened, the fierceness giving way to a quiet understanding. "It's only the beginning," she said. As the dream realm shifted once more, I knew that the path ahead would demand more than courage. It would ask for sacrifice, trust, and the strength to face the shadows both within and without. But for the first time, the bindings felt less like chains and more like threads we might one day unravel. And so, with a cautious hope, we stepped forward into the unknown. The library's silence deepened around us, but I was no longer alone in the quiet. The journey to break the curse had begun. The glow of the dreamscape dimmed as we withdrew, the weight of our actions settling heavily upon my shoulders. Tamsin paced restlessly, dark curls catching the faint light as she muttered about risks and plans. "We can't keep this up without consequences," I warned, voice barely above a whisper. "Every time we tamper with the bindings, it takes more from me." She paused, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Then we need to be smarter. Find the core of the curse, the source of its power." Her words sparked a flicker of resolve inside me, a fragile ember against the cold. Together, we would face the library's magic not as victims, but as challengers. But the cost was clear. The deeper we delved, the more of myself I risked losing. Night after night, we returned to the dream realms, testing theories, unraveling strands of enchantment. Each attempt was a battle of wills against the unseen forces that bound us. The library's magic responding with a fierce, silent wrath. There were moments of startling beauty, the shimmer of forgotten knowledge, the soft voices of dreaming souls reaching out in hope. But there were also shadows, echoes of the Curator's watchful presence, dream guardians stirring in the dark. One evening, as the dreamscape folded around us like a fragile cocoon, Tamsin's voice broke the tense silence. "I'm scared," she admitted, eyes wide and honest. "Not just for me, but for you. This place, it changes people." I reached out, fingers brushing her restless curls. "Then we make sure we don't let it win." Her smile was brief but fierce. Together. And in that moment, amidst the swirling mists and whispering pages, I knew that defying the bindings was more than a fight for freedom, it was a fight for our very souls. But the library had other plans. As our defiance grew, so did the shadows lurking just beyond the edges of our dreams. The Curator's presence tightened, and the cost of rebellion loomed ever larger. The question was no longer if we could break free, it was whether we could survive the price. And as the bindings stretched and cracked, so too did the fragile hope that kept us moving forward. The library was alive, watching, waiting, and the battle for its secrets was only beginning. As dawn threatened the edges of my consciousness, I awoke with the lingering weight of the dream realm pressing heavily on my chest. Tamsin's words echoed in my mind, a reminder that the path we'd chosen was treacherous. But the threads of hope wove through the darkness, fragile yet unbreakable. And so, with breath steadying and resolve hardening, I prepared to return to the library's depths, to challenge the bindings, to fight for freedom, and to reclaim the years stolen from me. The sleeping library had awoken, and so had I. The air hung heavy with the scent of old parchment and faint whispers of long-forgotten incantations. She had been wandering the labyrinthine stacks for hours, chasing the elusive promise of understanding the library's tangled mysteries. Her fingers brushed against the spines of countless books, each one humming softly with the dreams of trapped souls. It was in this dim, cluttered alcove, half hidden behind a towering shelf of cracked leather volumes, that she first heard it whisper, a voice so low it was almost indistinguishable from the rustling of pages. Liora froze, heart quickening. The shadows shifted, and from the gathering dusk emerged a figure, not quite solid, as though woven from the very darkness that pooled in the corners. He was tall and slender, his form draped in robes that seemed stitched from twilight itself, their edges dissolving into mist. His eyes glimmered faintly, twin embers glowing just beneath the surface of shadow. "You seek answers," the figure murmured, his voice a breath threading through the silence like a secret wind. "But knowledge here is as tangled as the roots of the oldest tree. Beware the cost of unwrapping the bindings." Liora stepped closer, compelled despite the stirrings of unease curling in her stomach. "Who are you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I am the Whispering Archivist," he replied, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Keeper of the catalogue, guardian of secrets." He gestured with a slender hand, and the shelves around them seemed to pulse, the books shifting imperceptibly, alive with their own hidden rhythms. Each tome you open, each soul you disturb, sets in motion threads you cannot see. To understand the bindings, you must listen to the words, to the silences, to the spaces between. Liora nodded, her mind racing to grasp the weight of his cryptic counsel. "Why do you help me?" The archivist's smile deepened, though it held no warmth. "Because even shadows have their purposes. The Curator's grip tightens, the library's delicate balance fractures. You are a key, whether you know it or not." They moved together through winding aisles where the walls breathed faintly, the very air thrumming with latent power. The archivist paused before a shelf that seemed older than the rest, its wood gnarled and blackened with age. With a finger, he traced a line of runes glowing faintly beneath the dust. "These markings tell of the library's origin," he whispered, "and the curse that binds the souls." The Curator sought control, but his ambition turned the magic into chains. "If you wish to save what remains, you must understand the roots of this sorrow." Liora leaned closer, the runes pulsing softly under her gaze. "How do I break the curse?" "Patience," the archivist urged. "The answers lie hidden in riddles and shadows. But beware, knowledge is a double-edged sword. To grasp the light, one must be prepared to face the darkness." His eyes flickered briefly, a glimpse of something fragile beneath the enigma. Not all who wander here seek freedom. Some are content to be prisoners of their own making. Before Liora could ask more, the archivist's form began to waver, dissolving into the swirling mist of pages that filled the air like snowflakes caught in a silent storm. In his place, on the shelf where he had paused, lay a parchment etched with a riddle in shimmering ink. Bound by time, yet free in dream, where silence holds a whispered scream. To break the chain, the seeker must see the price of knowledge and set it free. Liora swallowed hard, clutching the parchment as the room seemed to contract and expand with the pulse of the library's heartbeat. The archivist's words echoed in her mind, a haunting melody she could not yet decipher. As the shadows lengthened and the night deepened, Liora felt the weight of the library's secrets settle around her like a shroud. She was no longer merely a visitor or a runaway seeking refuge. She was a part of this placer thread woven into the tapestry of dreams and sacrifices, and the Curator's dark shadow loomed ever closer. She folded the riddle carefully, tucking it into her coat as she stepped back into the maze of shelves. The air was thick with anticipation. Each whispered secret, each cryptic clue was a step deeper into the unknown. The library was alive, and it was watching. Liora's journey had only just begun. With a deep breath, she pressed forward, the soft patter of her footsteps swallowed by the endless sea of books and dreams. The archivist's riddles danced at the edge of her thoughts, a beacon and a warning intertwined, urging her onward into the heart of the mystery. And somewhere in the shadowed recesses, the Curator waited. As I stepped forward, the mirrors rippled and warped, distorting my reflection into faces I barely recognized. There was the frightened girl who had run away from a life too loud and painful, her eyes wide with terror and uncertainty. Another showed a braver version, shoulders squared, eyes gleaming with determination, ready to face whatever came next. Yet another simply looked lost, swallowed by shadows and silence, as if she had already given up on finding a home. Soft whispers filled the air, voices overlapping and weaving through the cold space, echoing my doubts and fears. I reached out to touch one of the closest mirrors, and my fingertips trembled as the glass rippled beneath my skin like liquid. The reflections shifted, and suddenly I was no longer certain where I ended and the dream realm began. The boundaries between the waking world and this place felt fragile like a thin veil stretched taut and ready to tear. The air buzzed with a strange energy, both inviting and threatening. I could almost hear the library breathing around me, its magic wrapping tightly yet protectively, a cage forged from the promise of sanctuary. A soft glow emerged from the swirling mists, and Eleanor appeared, her pale blue form shimmering like a ghost woven from moonlight. Her eyes held sadness and wisdom, and her voice was a gentle murmur that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The library holds many truths, Liora," she said, her tone both soothing and cryptic. "It is a refuge, yes, but also a prison. To seek shelter here is to accept the cost, the fracture within yourself that must be mended or embraced." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. "How do I know which part of me is real?" I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. "Which reflection is the true me?" Eleanor's gaze softened. "Perhaps none, or all. You are a mosaic of choices and fears, loss and hope. The library reflects what you carry inside. To heal, you must accept every shard, even the broken ones." Before I could respond, a sudden burst of restless energy shattered the quiet. Tamsin stormed into the dreamscape, her dark curls wild and eyes blazing with urgency. "Stop wasting time," she snapped, her voice a sharp contrast to Eleanor's calm. "We can't afford to be cautious. This place is a trap. Every moment we hesitate, the Curator tightens the bindings. You have to choose, fight or surrender." Her words pierced the fragile silence, igniting a conflict between caution and courage within me. I felt the pull of the library's magic, a tether that promised safety but demanded sacrifice. My reflections flickered in the mirrors around me, each one silently pleading for a choice. "I don't want to lose myself," I whispered, "but I can't stay lost either." Tamsin's eyes softened for a moment. "Then choose to be more than a prisoner," she said, extending a hand. "We break these bindings together, or we remain shadows forever." The hall of mirrors shimmered as my reflection steadied, the fractured images slowly coalescing into a single, determined self. I stepped forward, heart pounding, ready to face whatever price the library demanded. For the first time, the sanctuary felt less like a cage and more like a crucible, shaping me into someone new. As the dream realm began to dissolve around me, the whispers faded, replaced by the steady, grounding presence of the library's ancient walls. The journey ahead was uncertain, the cost steep, but I knew I could not turn back. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, I felt the Curator's eyes watching, waiting for my next move. The fractured reflections had shown me not only what I feared to lose, but what I might yet become. And in that fragile space between dreams and reality, I took my first real step forward. But the question lingered, echoing in the hollow spaces of the library. How much of myself was I willing to sacrifice to find freedom? The answer remained just out of reach, like a whispered promise on the edge of dawn. I sat alone at a long oak table, scarred by the passage of untold years, a single tome resting before me. The leather cover was cracked and worn, its spine creaking faintly as if alive. I traced my fingers along its surface, feeling the roughness, the cold that seeped into my skin, and I hesitated. A whisper slipped through the stillness, barely audible, an echo of a warning I had been too afraid to heed until now. Each book I opened was more than a gateway to dreams and forgotten worlds. It was a thief, silently stealing the currency of my existence. A year, one whole year of my life, drained away with every page I dared to turn. This truth settled upon me like a shroud, suffocating and immutable. I could no longer deny the cost that had been paid in the silent hours I spent wandering these endless stacks. I was trapped in a bargain I had not fully understood, with stakes far higher than the sanctuary I sought. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, trying to still the storm of fear and sorrow that welled inside me. The library around me seemed to pulse, alive with a quiet, knowing breath. It was as if the very building was watching, waiting to see if I would break or bend beneath its weight. Liora, the voice was soft, ethereal, carrying a warmth that cut through the chill. I opened my eyes to find Eleanor's shimmering pale blue form standing across the table, her translucent robes flowing like a gentle tide. Her eyes held centuries of wisdom and an unspoken sadness. "You feel it now, don't you? The price we all pay," she said, her tone both gentle and grave. I nodded, unable to speak. Words felt too fragile to carry the weight of what I had just realized. "The magic here is not without sacrifice," Eleanor continued. "Every soul bound within these pages has given something in time, in life, in hope. The library demands balance, and it takes what it must to survive." I swallowed hard, the taste of dust and old ink thick on my tongue. "But how do you endure it? How do you keep going when every moment costs you?" Her gaze softened, and she reached out, her hand passing through mine like a sigh. We remember what we fight for, and sometimes what we are willing to lose. Before I could respond, the sharp sound of footsteps echoed down the aisle. Tamsin appeared, her dark curls, wild eyes blazing with restless fire. "Enough with the pity party," she snapped, crossing her arms fiercely. "You think I haven't felt the years slip from my grasp? We're all prisoners here, Liora, not saints. But waiting to lose yourself won't save you." Her words stung, but they carried a truth I couldn't ignore. I had been so consumed by fear of loss that I had forgotten the reason I had come here at all: to find refuge, to find understanding, to survive. "Then what do we do?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "We fight. We learn the rules, and we bend them." The challenge in her eyes was fierce and unrelenting. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. As if summoned by the tension, a soft rustle stirred the shadows nearby. From the dimmest corner emerged the whispering archivist, a figure cloaked in darkness, his presence both unsettling and oddly comforting. His voice was a low murmur, carrying riddles and warnings. "Preserve what you can, but beware the cost of preservation," he intoned. "The library's heart beats on sacrifice, but even sacrifice can be tempered by cunning. Seek the threads unseen, the loopholes between bindings. Time is both your enemy and your ally." I blinked, trying to catch the meaning behind his cryptic words. The library was a puzzle wrapped in enchantment. Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, deeper mysteries. That night, as I lay beneath the ancient rafters, the weight of the year I had lost pressed heavily on my chest. Yet beneath the sorrow, a flicker of determination sparked. I would not let the library consume me. I would find a way to hold on to the precious years still left to me, even if it meant venturing further into the dream realm's tangled secrets. The cost was steep, the price was real, but the sanctuary I had found was worth the fight. And so I turned the page. The air shifted, the world around me blurring as the magic stirred. Each word I read whispered promises and warnings, pulling me deeper into the labyrinth of dreams and sacrifice. The library waited patiently, its breath steady, its eyes watching, as I stepped further into the unknown. This was no longer a refuge simply to hide in, it was a battlefield, and I was ready to fight. But as the shadows lengthened and the clock of my life ticked away, I couldn't shake the question that gnawed at my heart: how much more could I lose before there was nothing left of me at all? The library's silence answered only with the soft rustling of pages turning in the dark. Liora stepped cautiously over the worn stone threshold, the air thick with the scent of faded ink and dust, the smell of forgotten worlds and whispered memories. It was here, in this hushed corner, that the shimmer began to coalesce into a form both fragile and luminous. Eleanor emerged, her presence ethereal, pale blue light flowing like water around her translucent robes. Her eyes held the weight of centuries, gentle yet infinitely sad. "You came," Eleanor whispered, her voice a soft ripple in the stillness. "Few do, and fewer still with the courage to stay." Liora swallowed hard, the truth of Eleanor's existence settling over her like a delicate veil. "I need to understand," she said quietly. "Why are you trapped here? What is this place?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the spines of books that surrounded them, each one a prison and a cradle for a dreaming soul. "Long ago, I was a scholar, much like yourself, eager for knowledge and the mysteries of this world. But the library is no ordinary sanctuary. It binds those who seek refuge within its walls, preserving us in dreams, suspended between life and oblivion. As she spoke, the books around them seemed to breathe. Pages fluttered as if stirred by a silent wind, words shifting and reforming a dance of arcane script and shifting meaning. Eleanor's story unfolded like the fragile tendrils of a dream, each word painting a picture of sacrifice and longing. The magic that holds us here is both a blessing and a curse. It offers sanctuary to those who are lost, but it demands a price. A year of life for each page turned, a lifetime for each secret uncovered. Liora felt the weight of those words settle deep within her chest. It was the cost she had glimpsed before, now made real by Eleanor's quiet confession. And you? How did you come to be trapped? Eleanor's form flickered, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I sought to unravel the library's deepest secrets, hoping to find a way to free us all. But ambition and hope are a dangerous mix here. I found binding spells woven into the very fabric of the books, stronger than any chain. My consciousness became entwined with the pages I studied, and now I am part of the library's story, unable to escape the bindings I sought to break. The room seemed to pulse with the collective sorrow of trapped souls. Liora's fingers brushed against the nearest tome, its leather cracked and worn, the whispers of the dreaming soul within faint but persistent. Is there no hope for you? Hope endures, Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the melancholy. It is what sustains us. Though I am bound, I retain fragments of awareness, enough to guide those who come after me. Liora's gaze sharpened with newfound determination. Then I will listen, and I will fight for freedom for you, for Tamsin, and for all the souls caught in this web. Eleanor's form brightened for a moment, the pale blue glow bathing the alcove in a soft radiance. Remember this, knowledge without compassion is a cage. To break the bindings, you must understand not only the magic, but the hearts entwined within it. The mentor's words settled like a bomb, seeping into Liora's resolve. As Eleanor's form began to fade, the alcove returned to its quiet stillness. Yet its silence now thrummed with possibility. Alone but no longer uncertain, Liora stepped forward, carrying the weight of Eleanor's story and the fragile hope it kindled. The path ahead was perilous, but she would not walk it alone. Outside the alcove, the library awaited its endless shelves, a maze of dreams and dangers. With Eleanor's wisdom echoing in her mind, Liora felt the stirrings of courage swell within her, a quiet fire against the creeping shadows. The journey to unravel the library's secrets and to free the dreaming souls was only beginning. And with every step, she drew closer to the heart of the sleeping library's enigma. But the cost a relentless toll of years slipping away, ever near, a reminder that some sacrifices could never be undone. Still, Liora's breath steadied, and her eyes, dark and intense, gleamed with the fierce light of one determined to face whatever dreams and nightmares the library held. The whispered promise of sanctuary had transformed into a solemn vow to guard, to fight, and perhaps to save. The shadows shifted softly as Liora turned from the alcove, her steps echoing through the vaulted halls. Somewhere deep within the stacks, a faint rustle of pages seemed to sing in answer, a lullaby of hope and sorrow intertwined, waiting to be heard. I sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the worn spines of countless books towering above like silent sentinels, their whispers barely audible. Across from me, Tamsin's restless figure shifted, her dark curls falling messily over her intense eyes that flickered with both pain and fire. It was the first time she had spoken so openly about her past, and the weight of her words pressed against the stillness. "You don't understand," she said, voice low but fierce. "This place, it's not sanctuary, it's a cage. They trapped me here decades ago, And every day I spend locked inside a book is a day stolen from my life, from my freedom." Her words struck me like a sudden chill. I had known the cost of the library's magic, the cruel toll it demanded with every page I turned. But hearing it laid bare in her voice made it real in a new way. Tamsin's bitterness was a mirror of the fear I buried deep inside myself, the fear of losing myself entirely to this place. "I'm sorry," I whispered, unsure if apology was enough. "I didn't mean to." "Don't." She cut me off, her eyes flashing. "You don't have to be sorry, but you have to stop pretending this is some kind of refuge. It's a trap, and if we don't fight back, we'll never get out." Her defiance was contagious, stirring something in me that I hadn't felt since I first stumbled into the library. A spark of rebellion, of hope, but it was tempered by caution, a quiet voice that warned me of the price we would pay. Tamsin's story unfolded like a shattered mosaic as she led me through a dream realm. A shifting landscape of floating pages and ink-streaked skies where memories seeped from the very fabric of the air. I saw fragments of her past, moments of laughter cut short by betrayal, the cold grip of the Curator's magic binding her to the endless shelves, the slow erosion of years marked only by the fading light in her eyes. "I was like you once," she said, her voice barely audible over the whispering winds of the dreamscape. "Quiet, careful, hoping to survive. But survival isn't enough. We need to break these chains." The words settled in my heart, heavy yet burning with urgency. I wanted to believe, to embrace the boldness that Tamsin exuded so naturally, but a part of me hesitated. The library's enchantment was seductive, a fragile promise of safety that I feared losing. Back in the physical space of the library, the contrast was stark. The cold silence felt heavier now, the shadows of the towering stacks pressing close. I traced my fingers along the cracked leather spine of an ancient tome, feeling the pulse of the dreaming soul trapped within. Their quiet suffering echoed Tamsin's anger, binding us all in a tapestry of sacrifice and longing. "What will we do?" I finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. Tamsin's eyes met mine, fierce and unwavering. "We fight together. We find the cracks in the bindings and tear them wide open. No more waiting, no more fear." Her words were a challenge and a promise. In that moment, I knew that my journey could no longer be one of mere survival. It was time to face the darkness that held us captive, to risk everything for the chance at freedom. As we stood side by side beneath the towering shelves, our shadows stretching long and merging, I felt the fragile threads of our alliance tighten. The library's silence seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the storm to come. And deep within me, a quiet resolve took root, the resolve to confront the Curator, to unravel the curse, and to reclaim the stolen years for all of us. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, but for the first time since arriving, I felt something like hope. Not the fleeting kind that slips away in the dark, but a steady flame, fueled by defiance and the shared strength of those who refuse to be forgotten. The library was awakening, and so were we. The candle flickered, casting trembling shadows that danced along the cracked walls of the alcove. Tamsin's voice softened, the fire in her eyes giving way to a quiet vulnerability. "I don't know if I'll ever be free," she admitted, "but I can't keep living like this, trapped, fading away. If we don't try, what's the point?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Then we try, for all of us." The air between us was thick with unspoken fears and fragile hopes. Outside, the library's labyrinthine corridors stretched endlessly, waiting to reveal their secrets. Somewhere in the shadows, the Curator's watchful eyes lingered, his presence a relentless reminder of the stakes. But for now, in this quiet corner of forgotten knowledge, two souls bound by pain and courage forged a pact. Together, we would challenge the bindings, confront the darkness, and fight for a future where the library's magic was no longer a curse, but a sanctuary. And so, the reckoning began. I had been drawn here by a strange compulsion, a quiet insistence that the answers to the weight pressing on my chest lay buried in the forgotten chambers. The walls, lined with books whose leather spines were cracked and faded with age, seemed to lean in closer as I passed, as though the library itself was holding its breath. In the center of the room, beneath a dome of glass dusted with the residue of centuries, lay a pedestal bearing a single tome unlike any I had encountered before. Its cover was stitched from dark, supple leather and embossed with symbols that seemed to shift under the wavering candlelight. As I reached out, a cold shiver ran down my spine, but curiosity, as always, outweighed caution. The moment my fingers brushed the cover, the room dissolved into a swirl of shadows and light, and I found myself standing before a visionless spectral projection that played out like a silent film in the air before me. It was the story of a man, the Curator, but not as the imposing figure I had glimpsed lurking in the corridors. This was a younger version, his features sharp but full of hope, his eyes bright with unspent dreams. He was a scholar, like the many I had read about in the library's whispered histories. His hands trembled as he pored over forbidden texts, his mind hungry for knowledge that promised the impossible, immortality. I could see the feverish nights, the slow unraveling of his soul, the moment when the pursuit of eternal life became a cage, binding him as surely as the magic that held the dreaming souls captive. Before I could blink, Eleanor materialized beside me, her pale blue form shimmering softly like moonlight on water. Her voice was a gentle murmur, barely more than a breath, yet it carried the weight of ages. He was once like you, Liora, a seeker of refuge, a traveler in search of meaning. The Curator's heart was not always shadowed, but ambition, unchecked and desperate, can consume even the brightest of flames. Her words wrapped around me, filling the space between the flickering images. The spectral scene shifted, revealing the transformation, the scholar's face contorted by obsession, the robes darkening as if woven from the library's very shadows, his eyes glowing faintly like embers, burning with a hunger that no mortal could satisfy. The library itself seemed to pulse in response, the air tightening as if it were a living thing, bound to the Curator's fate. I felt an ache settle deep within me, a sorrow for the man he had been and a fear for what he had become. Is there no hope for him? I whispered, my voice trembling. Eleanor's gaze was steady, her expression mournful. The threads of his humanity remain tangled within the bindings, but they are fragile. The curse that holds him is as much a prison of his own making as it is the library's enchantment. I stepped back, the vision fading like the last embers of a dying fire. The revelation left me reeling. The Curator was not simply a villain to be vanquished. He was a cautionary tale, incarnate warning, etched into the very fabric of this place. His story complicated the path ahead, transforming my mission from a simple battle against darkness into a reckoning with loss, obsession, and the perilous thirst for knowledge. As I turned toward the exit, my thoughts churned. How many others had fallen victim to the seduction of power here? How many souls had been ensnared, not by malice, but by the desperate hope to escape the frailty of life? I knew the confrontation with the Curator was inevitable, but now, armed with the truth of his past, I felt the weight of empathy cloud my resolve. Could I fight a man who was, in some sense, still trapped within himself? Could I break the bindings without breaking what little humanity remained? The library around me breathed softly, its ancient heart beating in time with my own. I clenched my fists, determination slowly knitting itself from the threads of sorrow. The curator's tale was no longer just his, it was mine, and the story of every soul bound within these walls. The path forward would demand everything I had, and more. I stepped out of the chamber, the shadows whispering secrets I was only beginning to understand. The sleeping library was waking, and so was I. I had come to understand that the library was not just a building, but a living labyrinth of dreams and memories, and somewhere within it, the curators will manifest it in forms both terrifying and inscrutable. Tonight, I faced those forms, the dream guardians. They emerged from the swirling mists like phantoms born of smoke and embers. Their shapes were ever shifting, each movement dissolving into darkness, only to reappear moments later with a serpentine grace. Their eyes glowed faintly, like dying coals, watching me with cold, unblinking vigilance. I could feel their presence before I saw them, a quiet pressure that squeezed my chest and made the air vibrate with silent menace. "You cannot escape," a voice whispered, not from a mouth, but from the very shadows around me. "The curator's will is absolute." I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the spine of the book I had brought with me, a talisman against the void. But I knew brute force would not save me here. The guardians were not mere monsters to be fought. They were extensions of the library's magic, bound to enforce the bindings that kept the dreaming souls captive. The first guardian lunged, a blur of dark smoke coalescing into a form with clawed hands and a face that flickered between human and something less definable. I ducked behind a column of shifting light, my breath ragged. The corridors around me twisted and turned in impossible ways, walls rippling like liquid, doors appearing and vanishing without warning. The dreamscape was a maze designed to disorient and trap. I ran. Every step was a gamble, every heartbeat a prayer. The guardians whispered my name, their voices like the rustling of dead leaves. Panic surged, but beneath it, a fierce determination took root. I could not let myself become another lost soul, another book bound forever in silence. In the midst of the chaos, a soft glow appeared beside me. Eleanor, shimmering in her pale blue robes, her form translucent but unmistakably real. "Remember," she said, her voice a soothing balm, "they are bound by more than magic. Their essence is tied to emotion, fear, regret, longing. Find the thread that unravels their bindings." I nodded, though the meaning was still cloudy. But there was no time for doubt. A guardian's shadow reached out, tendrils curling like smoke around my ankle. Instead of pulling away, I steadied myself and met its gaze. "Why do you imprison them?" I asked aloud, voice trembling but steady. The shadow hesitated, flickering uncertainly. For a moment, the ember eyes softened, and in that instant, I glimpsed something fragile, remnants of a soul yearning for release. Drawing on that moment of vulnerability, I reached out with empathy, the kind I had buried deep inside myself after years of running and hiding. The shadow recoiled, the claws retracting, as if uncertain what to do with this unexpected kindness. "You are not the curator," I whispered. "You do not have to be his chains." The guardian's form wavered, then slowly dissolved into a mist that drifted away, leaving behind a faint warmth that spread through the dreamscape like dawn's first light. This was the turning point. The dream guardians were not invincible. They were bound by the very emotions that had once made them human, trapped by the curator's curse, but not beyond hope. With each encounter, I learned more, just about the guardians, but about myself. The library's magic was a cage, yes, but it was also a mirror, reflecting the fears and hope of all who dwelled within it. As I pressed deeper into the labyrinth, the shadows seemed less suffocating. The curator's grip was still strong, his presence a dark pulse beneath everything. But I was no longer just a frightened girl fleeing her past. I was becoming something else, a guardian in my own right, armed not with spells or swords, but with empathy, intellect, and an unyielding will to reclaim freedom for the dreaming souls. The dream realms shifted around me, vast and strange, but for the first time, I felt that I might navigate them and, maybe, just maybe, change them. But the curator would not let go without a fight. His guardians would grow stronger, more cunning. And the cost of this knowledge was still written in the fading years of my own life. The chase was far from over, and I was ready. It was a sensation like the faint hum before a storm, a quiet but insistent pulse that seemed to vibrate beneath the dust-laden shelves and the worn wooden floorboards. She sat cross-legged at a sturdy oak table, the faint glow of candlelight flickering across the cracked spines of the books she had gathered. The pages seemed to shimmer, their edges blurring at times as if the ink itself was alive, dancing just beyond the reach of her vision. The library around her breathed, exhaling whispers that tangled with the soft rustling of old pages. It was as though the walls themselves were alive, pulsing with the magic that had long bound the dreaming souls within their paper prisons. A sudden chill swept through the room, a sharp breath of cold that carried with it a faint whisper, words she could not quite catch but that set her nerves on edge. The flame of her candle flickered violently, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched and twisted unnaturally along the shelves. The silence was no longer comforting. It was a warning. Milo, the sleek black cat who had become her silent companion, stirred beside her feet. His fur bristled, and his low, rumbling growl was barely audible. He leaped to his paws, his intense, shining eyes fixed on the far wall of the corridor beyond the reading room. There, faint, ghostly silhouettes flickered and shimmered like mirages caught between worlds. The veil between waking and dreaming was fraying, revealing glimpses of the dream realm's restless inhabitants. Liora's heart quickened. She had sensed this weakening before, moments when the library's magic seeped out, threading through the cracks in reality. But now it was intensifying, spreading like ink spilled across fragile parchment. She rose carefully, her footsteps muffled on the worn carpet as she moved toward the corridor. The air tasted metallic, thick with the scent of old paper and something darker, something like smoke curling from a dying fire. The walls pulsed faintly, their surfaces shifting like living flesh beneath her fingertips. It was an unsettling sensation, a reminder that the library was no mere building, but a living entity caught between worlds. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure, a tall, gaunt silhouette cloaked in robes that seemed woven from the darkness itself. The curator emerged from the shifting gloom, his eyes glowing faintly like embers smoldering in the dark. His presence was a suffocating weight, a reminder of the oppressive magic that held the souls captive. "You feel it too," he said, his voice a low, rasping whisper that echoed through the fractured space. "The veil thins, and with it, the boundaries of control." Liora met his gaze, steady despite the fear tightening her chest. Why let it weaken? Why risk everything? The curator's lips curled into a shadow of a smile. Control requires sacrifice. The library is a delicate balance, and sometimes the price must be paid in moments of chaos. He stepped closer, the shadows clinging to him like a living cloak. But beware, child. The more you meddle, the more you invite the fracture to consume you. Before she could respond, Eleanor appeared in a swirl of pale blue light, her ethereal form shimmering softly against the stark darkness. Her voice was a gentle murmur, a balm against the creeping dread. "Liora," she said, reaching out a translucent hand, the veil phrase not without consequence. "Lost souls slip between the worlds, fading into nothingness unless we act swiftly." Together, they stepped through the shifting dreamscape, moving past wavering shadows and flickering memories. The consequences of the weakening veil were laid bare, souls caught in limbo, their forms flickering like dying stars. Desperate to be remembered, to be freed. Liora's resolve hardened. This was no longer just a sanctuary or a prison. It was a battleground for the very essence of dreams and reality. The library's magic, once a protective embrace, now threatened to unravel, and with it, the fragile hope of salvation. As the veil thinned, so too did the line between fear and courage, loss and hope. And in that fragile space, Liora knew her next move would determine not just her fate, but the fate of all bound within the sleeping library. The candle flickered once more as the shadows lengthened, and the library waited, breathing, watching, as the battle for its soul began anew. I first noticed them one afternoon, nestled deep within a shadowed alcove at the heart of the sleeping library. The books around me hummed faintly, their bindings pulsing with a gentle glow. And when I opened one carefully, tendrils of light unfurled, delicate and shimmering, reaching out like fragile arms, seeking something beyond their pages. At first, I thought it was my imagination, perhaps the library playing tricks on a mind stretched thin by years, lost and secrets kept too long. But as I watched, the threads grew stronger, weaving themselves into intricate patterns, looping through the air and connecting the open tomes to figures that shimmered like ghosts just beyond the edge of sight. Eleanor appeared beside me, her pale blue form radiating a soft light that mingled with the glowing threads. "They are the ties that bind us," she said quietly, her voice a soothing echo in the quiet. "Every soul here, every story captured in these pages is linked by these strands. They carry memory, emotion, and hope." I reached out a tentative hand, and a filament brushed against my fingertips, sending a warm pulse through my veins. The threads vibrated gently, and suddenly I felt the weight of countless lives intertwined with mind dreams deferred. Sacrifices made, the endless yearning to be free. "These connections," I whispered, "they're alive." Eleanor nodded. "More than you know." The magic of the library is not just in the knowledge it holds, but in the bonds between those who dwell within it. To unravel its mysteries, you must understand the threads, their strength and fragility. Days passed as I explored this new reality. I sought out Tamsin, whose restless spirit matched the flickering energy of those silver strands. She was skeptical at first, her sharp eyes narrowing as she watched me reach out to the glowing threads that danced at the edges of perception. "You think this will save us?" she asked, voice rough with years of bitterness. "These connections, they tie us down just as surely as the bindings." "Maybe," I replied, "but maybe they also hold the key to freedom." Together, we ventured into the dream realms once more, guided by Eleanor's steady light. The dreamscape was unlike anything I'd seen, a vast web of luminous strands stretching endlessly, pulsing with energy as if the library's heart beat through this network. We walked carefully along the glowing threads, hearing whispers of forgotten memories and distant hopes as the strands vibrated beneath our feet. In that place, the barriers between us seemed to fall away. Tamsin's guarded demeanor softened, and Eleanor's melancholy gave way to a quiet determination. I realized then that the library's magic was not merely a prison of knowledge, but a living tapestry of souls bound together, each thread a story, each connection a lifeline. Back in the stacks, Milo appeared quietly, brushing against my leg with comforting familiarity. His green eyes gleamed with something unspoken, and as I knelt to stroke his fur, I felt a pulse of magic radiate from him. It was a tether to the waking world, a reminder that I was still myself, still fighting for a future beyond the pages. The whispering archivist watched from the shadows, his presence both unsettling and necessary. When I approached the glowing threads near a locked tome, his voice drifted to me in riddles and warnings, urging caution but also urging trust. "The threads will test you," he murmured, "but they are your path, if you choose to follow." I hesitated, knowing the stakes. The curator's influence was spreading, tightening like a noose around the library's fragile heart. But I could not turn back. These connections were my strength, the hope that the curse could be undone. As I reached out once more, the threads wrapped gently around my fingers, pulling me deeper into the web of dreams and memories. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it not alone, but bound to those who had come before, and those who would follow. The library was alive, and so was the magic that linked us all. But in the distance, I could feel the curator's shadow stirring, watching, waiting. The threads of connection were fragile, and the fight was far from over. And so I took a breath, steadying myself for the path ahead, knowing that every bond I forged was a step toward freedom or deeper into the dream. Milo, the sleek black cat with eyes like flickering amber flames, had been following me since the moment I stepped inside this forgotten sanctuary. For days, I had taken comfort in his presence, a small, living tether to the outside world, a soft heartbeat in the hollow quiet of endless books. But tonight, something was different. There was a purpose in his movements, a deliberate urgency in the way he looked back at me, beckoning me to follow deeper into the labyrinthine stacks. I hesitated only for a moment before giving in to the pull. The air grew cooler, the shadows longer, and the faint scent of old parchment and lavender filled my senses. Milo's eyes glowed brighter, casting fleeting golden light against the darkened shelves. We passed aisles of ancient tomes bound in cracked leather, their titles faded beyond recognition, and shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly into the gloom. The library was no longer just a building. It was a living, breathing entity, and Milo was its secret pulse. Then we reached a small alcove bathed in a pale blue luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. Milo jumped gracefully onto a low pedestal, brushing his fur against my outstretched hand. The touch was electric, a warm ripple of magic that surged through my veins, making my skin tingle and my heart quicken. In that moment, I understood Milo was not just a stray cat. He was something far older and wiser, a guardian spirit woven from the library's own enchantment. As the warmth settled, a soft voice echoed in the stillness beside me. Turning, I saw Eleanor, the ethereal mentor who had guided me through the library's mysteries. Her shimmering form glowed softly, her pale blue robes flowing like mist. "He is the library's sentinel," she said quietly, her eyes full of melancholy and hope. "Milo carries the ancient magic that protects this place. He watches over the dreaming souls and those who seek refuge here." I knelt beside the cat, tracing the delicate lines of his sleek fur. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor smiled faintly, a sadness deep in her gaze. "Some truths reveal themselves only when the time is right. You needed to find your own path here, to learn the price of knowledge and the value of trust." Milo has waited patiently for you to be ready." Suddenly, Milo leaped onto a dusty, leather-bound tome resting on the pedestal. The book's pages fluttered open of their own accord, revealing glowing symbols and intricate illustrations that shimmered faintly in the bluish light. I reached out tentatively, fingers trembling, and realized that with Milo's presence, I could touch these ancient secrets without feeling the usual draining of my own life force. A surge of hope blossomed inside me. For so long, the library's enchantment had felt like a cage, stealing time from my life with every page I dared to open. But now, with Milo as my guardian, perhaps there was a way to explore the dream realms without sacrificing all I had left. Eleanor's voice broke the silence again. "He is more than a cat. He is a manifestation of the library's will, a beacon of light in the shadowed stacks. Trust him, and he will guide you through the darkest corners where even I cannot go." The words settled deep within me like a seed planted in fertile soil. I looked down at Milo, who blinked slowly, his amber eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond the ages. Together, we would unravel the secrets of the sleeping library, not as lost souls, but as guardians of its magic and keepers of its fragile hope. But even as a flicker of courage lit my heart, I knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. The Curator's shadow loomed ever closer, and the bindings that held the dreaming souls were still taut and unyielding. Milo's secret was a gift, but gifts always came with their own burdens. I straightened, brushing the dust from my sleeves, and followed the cat deeper into the blue-tinged alcove. The library whispered around us, ancient and alive, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was not alone. The story of Milo's true nature was only beginning, and with it, my journey into the heart of the sleeping library's magic took a new, uncertain turn. What mysteries lay beyond the glowing pages? What secrets awaited in the dream realms Milo would help me navigate? And most pressing of all, how much of myself was I willing to sacrifice to protect this fragile sanctuary? As Milo's tail flicked once, sharp and sure, I felt the weight of those questions settle like a mantle over my shoulders. The night stretched ahead, full of shadows and promise, and I stepped forward, ready to face whatever dreams and dangers waited. The library was waking, and so was I. At the heart of the room stood an ancient mirror, its frame carved from gnarled silverwood and etched with indecipherable runes, pulsing faintly with magic. Liora's breath caught as she approached, the air thick with the scent of aged parchment and something more elusive, a bittersweet essence of memory and loss. She reached out, fingertips trembling, and touched the mirror's surface. It was cool to the touch, yet it rippled beneath her skin like liquid glass, as if the mirror itself were alive. Slowly, images began to coalesce within its depths, not her reflection, but a swirling tapestry of time, moments peeled back and laid bare. First, she saw herself as she was when she entered the library, a frightened girl with tangled dark hair and eyes wide with desperate hope. Then, the scenes shifted, each book opened, each dream realm entered, each year of her life quietly slipping away. The mirror did not lie. It counted the toll with unflinching clarity. Years lost, like fallen leaves, drifting beyond her grasp into the silent void. A soft sigh brushed her ear, and she turned to find Eleanor materializing beside her. The mentor's shimmering pale blue form flickered like a candle flame, serene yet sorrowful. "The mirror shows what the library claims," Eleanor murmured, her voice a gentle echo woven from wisdom and regret. "Not just the time you have lost, but the futures you might never see." Liora swallowed hard, eyes fixed once more on the mirror. The images twisted, revealing fractured visions. A future where she wandered endlessly within the library's labyrinth, forever bound to the dreaming souls. Another where she escaped, but hollowed and broken, her vitality drained. And yet another, faint and fragile, where light pierced the darkness and freedom was possible. Is there truly a way back? Liora whispered, voice fragile. Or is this the price I must pay? Eleanor's gaze held a poignant depth. The price is real. But the value of what you seek, the knowledge, the sanctuary, the truth is immeasurable. You must decide what you are willing to sacrifice and what you cannot. The mirror shimmered again, and for a fleeting heartbeat, Liora saw herself as she once was, whole, unscarred, vibrant with the promise of youth, unburdened by magic's cruel toll. The vision was a cruel bomb, a reminder of all she had given up and all she might never reclaim. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. The weight of lost years settled like a stone in her chest, heavy but not suffocating. Somewhere deep within, a fragile ember of hope flickered. I won't let this be the end, she vowed quietly. Not for me, and not for them. Eleanor smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Then the path ahead will be both perilous and profound. But you are not alone. Liora turned from the mirror, the room's shadows stretching and breathing with newfound life. The reflection of lost years was a stark reminder, but also a catalyst, an awakening of resolve that would carry her through the darkness to whatever dawn awaited. As she stepped away, the mirror's surface rippled once more, settling into stillness. The library held its breath, waiting for the next choice, the next sacrifice, the next dream to be dared. Outside the chamber, the soft murmur of whispering pages and distant footsteps beckoned. The journey was far from over, and Liora knew that each step forward demanded courage as much as knowledge. The mirror had shown her what was lost. Now it was time to seek what could be saved. With a steadying breath, she pressed forward, the fragile boundary between dreams and reality shimmering around her like a veil. The sleeping library awaited, alive and watching, as the years ahead unfurled into possibility and peril alike. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the whispered voices of the dreaming souls rose in quiet chorus, a haunting symphony of hope, sorrow, and the unyielding will to awaken. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows that danced across the tall, labyrinthine shelves, their spines etched with symbols that seemed to breathe faintly in the dimness. She sat cross-legged on the cold wooden floor, a fragile manuscript open before her. The words on the page shimmered and shifted, as if the ink itself were a pool of liquid dreams, rippling under her gaze. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the strange script, knowing that every page turned meant another year of her life slipping away, vanishing like the last breath of a fading star. A low, almost imperceptible sound stirred in the silence, the soft padding of paws on the floorboards. Milo, her silent companion, appeared beside her, his black fur blending into the shadows, save for the faint glow in his eyes that seemed to hold a universe of secrets. He brushed against her leg, a small comfort amid the vast loneliness of the library. Liora's thoughts churned. She was at a crossroads, both literal and metaphorical within the dream realms the library unfolded before her. She'd discovered a place where paths diverged beneath a sky streaked with violet and gold twilight, a realm woven from the threads of countless dreaming souls. Ghostly figures flickered around her like lanterns, their whispers curling in the air, fragile and desperate. Each voice was a plea, a warning, a memory of years lost and sacrifices made. The weight of their sorrow pressed on her heart. Her breath caught as she looked toward the paths ahead. One led deeper into the labyrinth of knowledge, promising answers but demanding further years in payment. The other hinted at escape, a chance to flee the enchantment's grasp, but surrendering the mysteries she so desperately sought to understand. The choice was hers, and the burden was crushing. From the shadows, Tamsin emerged, her restless energy a stark contrast to the stillness around them. Her dark curls framed an intense face, eyes flashing with impatience and something more vulnerable beneath it all. "You're wasting time," she said sharply, voice low but insistent. "Every moment you hesitate, the Curator's grip tightens. We can't afford to be cautious anymore. We have to fight." Liora met her gaze, torn between fear and resolve. "But every step deeper costs me something I can't get back. How do I know this fight won't consume me?" Tamsin's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because if you don't fight, you lose everything anyway." The tension between them hung heavy, a fragile thread stretched taut across the chasm of uncertainty. Before Liora could respond, a soft glow materialized near the towering shelves. Eleanor appeared, her form shimmering pale blue, robes flowing like liquid mist. Her presence was a balm, a whisper of quiet wisdom amid the storm. "The balance you seek is not found in avoiding sacrifice, but in understanding it," she said, voice gentle yet firm. "Freedom is not merely the absence of chains, it is the choice to bear them wisely." Liora absorbed the words, the bittersweet solace wrapping around her like a cloak. The library's silence seemed to pulse with meaning, a solemn promise etched into the very walls. As the candle sputtered and the manuscript's words danced before her eyes, Liora made her choice. With a steadying breath, she closed the book, feeling the familiar ache in her chest as the cost of knowledge settled deep within her bones. She would stay, she would delve deeper. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed by sacrifice and risk, but it was hers to walk. The crossroads faded, the dream realm folding into itself like the closing of a great, ancient eye. Liora rose, Milo weaving between her legs, and she stepped forward into the unknown, her heart a fragile beacon of hope and defiance. The library waited, alive and watching, its secrets ready to reveal themselves, but only to those who dared to pay the price. In that moment, the weight of years lost and futures yet unwritten pressed upon her, a silent challenge and a haunting promise. The journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, carried through the stillness. "I will not let this be my end." And with that vow, the sleeping library stirred, its ancient magic shifting as the first steps toward freedom and transformation folded in the quiet shadows. I had learned to recognize that sensation by now, that oppressive stillness that heralded the Curator's presence. Tonight, it was more than a whisper in the shadows. It was a storm gathering, unpredictable and fierce. I stood alone in the heart of the library's dream realm, a place where reality bent and twisted like smoke caught in an impossible dance. The shelves stretched infinitely, their spines glowing faintly with the light of countless dreaming souls. Somewhere beyond the fog, I knew he waited. A chill whispered down my spine as the shadows converged. Then, from the darkness, he emerged tall, gaunt, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from the night itself. His eyes, twin embers burning with a cold fire, locked onto mine without mercy. "You trespass where you do not belong, Liora," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed through the dreamscape like distant thunder. "This library is my domain, my collection. The souls within are mine to keep forever bound, forever preserved." Fear clawed at my throat, but I forced myself steady, meeting his gaze. "They're not your possessions," I said quietly. They're prisoners. They deserve freedom." A cruel smile flickered across his face, as if amused by my defiance. "Freedom, a luxury you cannot afford. Every page you turn, every breath you steal from your own life, binds you tighter. Soon you will understand the cost of your rebellion." His words were a venomous promise, and I felt the years slipping from me with every heartbeat. But I would not yield, not yet. The dream realm around us darkened, the shelves bending and twisting into jagged spikes that threatened to pierce the sky. The Curator raised a hand, and from the shadows emerged his guardians' ethereal figures, their forms flickering like dying stars, eyes glowing with cold malice. They advanced silently, a living wall of despair. I drew a shaky breath, feeling the weight of every lost year pressing down on my shoulders. But I was not alone. From the edges of the dreamscape, a soft light shimmered Eleanor's presence, gentle but resolute. Her translucent form glided beside me, her voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "He feeds on fear and doubt, Liora. Stand firm, for your strength lies not just in knowledge, but in your heart." Before I could reply, a sudden burst of restless energy cut through the tension. Tamsin appeared, her dark curls tangled, eyes blazing with fierce determination. "Enough hesitation," she snapped. "We're running out of time. If we don't act now, we'll be trapped forever." Her words were a spark in the gloom, igniting a fire within me. The Curator's gaze flickered, sensing the change in the dreamscape's tide. "You think you can defy me?" he hissed. "This library is eternal. I am eternal." I clenched my fists, the echo of the dreaming soul's silent pleas ringing in my ears. "Eternity without freedom is a curse," I said, "and I choose to break it." The Dream Guardians surged forward, and the battle began, not just of magic and will, but of ideals and sacrifice. Each step I took against him was a step closer to reclaiming the stolen years, but also a step deeper into the unknown. Back in the waking world, the library's corridors seemed to pulse with dark energy. The rustle of pages carried the Curator's whispered threats, an omnipresent reminder that the fight was far from over. I felt Milo brush against my leg, his emerald eyes steady and reassuring. Even in this place of shadows, his presence was a tether to reality and hope. As the confrontation faded into uneasy silence, one truth remained clear. The Curator's grip was tightening, and only by unraveling the tangled bindings of his curse could I hope to save the souls trapped within and myself. But as the dream realms shifted and the library itself seemed to hold its breath, I knew the greatest trials were still to come. The echoes of the Curator lingered like a dark melody, haunting every step, every choice. And somewhere deep inside, a question burned hotter than fear. Could I outwit a man who had bound himself to eternity, or would I become just another lost soul in the sleeping library? Only time would tell. And time, I was learning, was the most precious and perilous thing of all. Flickering candlelight cast wavering patterns across runes carved deep into a stone pedestal at its heart. Liora, Tamsin, and Eleanor crouched beside it, hands trembling as they unrolled brittle scrolls, their delicate parchment crackling softly like the whisper of old ghosts stirred from slumber. These scrolls were more than mere documents. They were fragments of a lost past, remnants of an ancient ritual whispered only in the most obscure manuscripts. Eleanor's ethereal form shimmered faintly blue in the dim light, her eyes reflecting a sadness born of too many years trapped within these walls. "The knowledge you seek is dangerous," she murmured, voice both a warning and a comfort. "The curse is woven tight, and to unravel it may come at a price none can yet foresee." Tamsin's restless fingers traced the faded ink with a fierce determination. "We have to try," she said, the sharp edge in her voice cutting through the quiet. Every moment we wait, we lose more of ourselves. Liora felt the weight of their combined desperation settle deep in her chest. She reached out, fingers brushing the delicate symbols etched in curling lines and spirals. The magic beneath the ink thrummed softly, a pulse she could almost hear, a heartbeat of the library itself. It whispered promises of freedom and threats of ruin. Just then, a ripple of shadow coalesced in the corner, and the whispering archivist emerged, his form shifting like smoke, eyes gleaming with cryptic intent. "Beware," he intoned, his voice a thread of sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "The bindings are old and fierce. To meddle with them is to dance on the edge of oblivion. The Curator will not yield his dominion without a tempest." Liora swallowed hard, the truth of his words settling like cold stones in her stomach. "What kind of tempest?" she asked, voice barely more than a breath. The archivist's gaze flicked to the scrolls, then past them to the shadows lurking just beyond the alcove. "One that could shatter more than the chains you seek to break." A sudden tremor rattled the ancient stones beneath their feet, and for a moment, the library's magic seemed to falter. The dream realms flickered like fragile glass, scenes of forgotten wonder and pain shimmering then vanishing, swallowed by encroaching darkness. From the depths, the distant echoes of the Curator's dream guardians grew louder, relentless, inevitable. Tamsin stood abruptly, eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "We don't have time for fear. We act now, or we remain prisoners forever." Eleanor nodded slowly, her translucent form steady despite the tremor. "Then let us prepare. The fragments of freedom are fragile, but they may be our only hope." Together, they began piecing together the ritual, a delicate dance of ancient words and symbols, each step fraught with danger and the unknown. Every moment spent in this forbidden knowledge drew them closer to a precipice between salvation and devastation where the price of freedom would be revealed in full. Outside the alcove, the library's silence deepened, as if holding its breath. Liora's heart beat in time with the pulsing magic beneath the scrolls, a fragile rhythm of hope and dread. The shadows stirred, and the battle for the souls within the sleeping library was only just beginning. The chapter closed with Liora locking eyes with Tamsin and Eleanor, the weight of their shared fate pressing down like the heavy tomes surrounding them. The fragments of freedom lay spread before them, a puzzle of light and darkness, waiting for the brave to solve it or be consumed by its cost. Every step echoed softly in the cavernous silence, the dim light from the scattered candles flickering against the ancient stones. I could feel it, a presence, something vast and old, waiting beyond the next archway. My breath caught as I pushed open a heavy wooden door, revealing a chamber unlike any I had seen before. The room was circular, its ceiling lost in shadows high above, and at its center stood a crystalline structure, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed steadily like a heartbeat. The air hummed with energy, a low vibration that thrummed beneath my skin and filled my ears with a sound almost like a whispered song. Around the chamber, the walls were carved with intricate runes that shimmered faintly, their shapes twisting and shifting as if alive. The magic here was raw, ancient, and unmistakably powerful. Eleanor appeared beside me, her pale blue form luminous against the dark stone. Her eyes were deep pools of sadness and knowledge. "This," she said softly, "is the heart of the library, the source of its magic and the prison that binds the souls within these books." I reached out tentatively, my fingers brushing the cool surface of the crystalline heart. A jolt ran through me, sharp and electric, and I gasped, pulling back. It's alive." She nodded, her gaze distant. The bindings are woven into this core, threads of magic and sacrifice that hold the dreaming souls captive. Each one is connected here, every life, every story. To unravel the curse, you must touch the heart itself. But be warned, it is fragile. Disrupt it too much, and the entire library could collapse. The weight of her words settled heavy in my chest. Years of running, of searching for safety, had led me here to the very source of the magic that had both sheltered and imprisoned me. I could almost hear the whispered voices of the souls, a chorus of longing and despair that urged me forward. Suddenly, the air shifted. Shadows gathered at the edges of the chamber, coalescing into the tall, gaunt figure cloaked in robes so dark they seemed to swallow the light. The curator's ember-like eyes burned with cold fire. "You tread on dangerous ground, Liora," his voice echoed, a low rumble that filled the space. "The bindings exist to protect the library and me. Interfere and you risk everything." Tamsin stepped from the shadows, her dark curls, wild eyes blazing with defiance. "We are not prisoners," she spat, "and we will not be shackled to your greed forever." A tense silence fell, the pulse of the crystalline heart quickening beneath my fingertips. I felt the cost of this magic, the years slipping away with every breath, but also a fierce determination rising within me. To free the souls, to break the curse, I would have to unravel these threads carefully, balancing hope and sacrifice like a tightrope walker over a yawning void. As the curator's shadow loomed and the library's heart beat steady and strong, I knew that this was only the beginning. The true battle lay ahead, between the desire for freedom and the price that must be paid. My hand tightened on the glowing crystal, ready to face whatever came next. But even as I stood at the heart of the sleeping library, the truth settled deep in my bones. Some sacrifices are woven into the fabric of magic, and to heal, sometimes we must bleed. The chamber whispered its secrets around me, ancient and unyielding. An Liora, runaway, seeker, and now guardian in waiting would have to become part of its story. For the library was alive. It dreamed, and it waited. With a steadying breath, I stepped forward, the glowing runes illuminating the path ahead, and the library's heart pulsing beneath my touch. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I glimpsed a fragile thread of hope that might one day set us all free. Tamsin stood motionless, her dark curls framing a face taut with indecision and fierce longing. Before her lay the tome, its cover worn, yet pulsing with a subtle, otherworldly glow, as if it contained the heartbeat of the library itself. The very air around the book seemed to shimmer, casting restless shadows that danced across the stone walls. "You don't have to do this." Liora's voice was soft, hesitant, yet carried an undercurrent of urgency. She stepped closer, the weight of years lost evident in her pale eyes, reflecting the flickering light. Tamsin's lips pressed into a thin line, her intense eyes flickering with defiance and desperation. "I've lived decades, trapped within these pages," she whispered, voice trembling yet resolute. "Every moment I spend here is stolen time. I can't wait anymore." The library around them seemed to hold its breath. The rows of books, each a tomb for a dreaming soul, stretched into shadowy infinity. Somewhere deep within, the curator's influence pulsed like a dark heartbeat, a reminder of the stakes at play. Eleanor emerged softly from the shadows, her ethereal form shimmering pale blue. "The path you choose is fraught with peril," she warned, her voice like a distant melody tinged with melancholy. "The bindings are ancient, their magic woven with sacrifice. To unravel them may demand more than you are prepared to give." Tamsin turned to her, eyes blazing. I'd rather risk it than remain a prisoner forever. Liora's heart clenched. The cautious part of her recoiled at the danger, but the ember of hope Tamsin ignited was undeniable. They had been bound by fear and the slow, steady erosion of time, but here, in this moment, a spark of rebellion flickered. Before they could speak further, the whisper of movement drew their attention. From the shadows stepped the whispering archivist, his form shifting and indistinct, as if woven from smoke and secrets. His voice was a low murmur, curling around them like a dark riddle. "Beware the price of unwinding the tapestry," he warned, eyes gleaming with inscrutable intent. "The threads you pull may unravel the very fabric that holds you together." Liora met his gaze, the weight of his words settling deep within her. The cost was always more than they anticipated. Yet, standing beside Tamsin, she knew that retreat was no longer an option. With a breath that trembled between hope and fear, Tamsin reached out and opened the tome. A surge of light burst forth, ethereal and brilliant, bathing the library in a surreal glow. The dream realm around them shifted. Walls seemed to ripple like water, the air thickened with raw magic, and the silent voices within the books stirred, whispering in a chorus of longing and release. Liora's heart pounded fiercely, caught in the surge of possibility and peril. The bindings that held the souls strained visibly, threads of enchanted light unraveling in bursts of shimmering color. Freedom was no longer a distant dream, but a fragile, trembling reality. "This is only the beginning," Tamsin said, voice steady despite the chaos unfolding. "We face the Curator now, and whatever it takes, we fight." Liora nodded, a newfound strength rising within her. The cost would be great, but the choice was clear. They would risk everything to reclaim stolen time and shattered lives. As the library quivered with the pulse of awakened magic, the shadows deepened at its edges, and the distant echo of the Curator's presence loomed ever closer. The battle for freedom had begun, and neither would walk away unchanged. The alcove's light dimmed to a steady glow, the first true sign of hope in years. Yet beneath it all, a question lingered. How much were they willing to sacrifice, and at what price would freedom come? Liora's gaze met Tamsin's, fierce and unwavering. "Together," she whispered, "no matter the cost." Outside, the library held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The scent of old parchment and dust hung heavy in the air, mingling with a faint trace of something metallic, like the tang of iron left by forgotten blood. Liora stepped cautiously into the dim space, her heartbeat a steady drum beneath the silence. She had come here chasing whispers, those elusive, fragmented hints that might unlock the secrets of the library's enchantment. But nothing had prepared her for the presence that awaited. It emerged from the darkness with no more fanfare than a sigh, the shadows folding and swirling into a form both insubstantial and unnervingly solid. The whispering archivist stood before her, her figure draped in shifting inks and twilight hues, his outline blurred as though seen through rippling water. His eyes, faint glimmers like distant stars, met hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You tread dangerous ground, Liora," he murmured, voice barely above a breath, yet resonating with a weight that filled the chamber. "The curse you seek to unravel is woven into the very fabric of this place. To undo it is to risk unraveling us all." The words hung between them, heavy and cold. As the archivist's gaze flicked to the shelves surrounding them, endless rows of books, each a vessel for a dreaming soul, suspended in fragile stasis. The souls here, they depend on this balance. Disturb it recklessly, and the threads may snap. The cost, chaos, loss beyond measure. Liora swallowed, a lump rising in her throat. She had expected warnings, enigmas wrapped in riddles, but never this stark, this dire. But isn't freedom worth the risk? She whispered, voice trembling with the weight of her hope and fear. The archivist's form flickered, the shadows seeming to deepen around him. Freedom is a precious thing, yes, but so is survival. Sometimes sacrifice is the price of preservation. You must choose carefully which you value more. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken questions and the faint rustle of ancient pages shifting on their own accord. Liora's mind raced, spinning through the impossible options. Could she truly save the souls without destroying the library itself? What would become of her if the balance tipped too far? As if summoned by her turmoil, a soft glow blossomed nearby. Eleanor materialized, her form shimmering pale blue like moonlight on water. She moved with grace, ethereal robes flowing as if caught in a gentle breeze, and settled beside Liora with a quiet strength. "He speaks truth," Eleanor said softly, her voice a soothing balm against the archivist's grave words. "The library is a fragile weave of light and shadow, sacrifice and hope. But within sacrifice lies the seed of renewal." Liora looked up, eyes searching Eleanor's for reassurance. "How do I know which path to follow? How do I choose without losing everything?" Eleanor smiled faintly, a touch of melancholy in her gaze. "You do not choose alone. The bonds you forge with the souls here, with those who walk beside you, will guide your steps. Trust in connection, Liora. Even in darkness, there is light." Before Liora could respond, a sudden burst of sharp footsteps echoed through the alcove. Tamsin appeared, her dark curls wild, eyes blazing with restless fire. "Enough hesitation," she snapped, voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "We can't wait for perfect answers. Every moment we delay, the curse tightens its grip. If we don't act now, we lose everything." Liora felt the tension coil between them, her caution clashing against Tamsin's impatience, the fragile hope battling with fierce urgency. "But the archivist warns of the risks," Liora countered. "The balance could break. We could lose the library and the souls forever." Tamsin's eyes sharpened, unwavering. "And if we do nothing, what then? The souls remain trapped, their years stolen, their hopes fading. Is that any better?" The room seemed to pulse with the weight of their conflict, the library itself holding its breath. Liora's heart ached with the impossible choices laid bare, to protect at the price of imprisonment, or to risk destruction for the chance of freedom. The archivist's form drifted closer, voice now a whisper echoing through the hollow space. "Know that every path bears its burden. The question is not whether you will suffer, but how you will bear it." Liora closed her eyes, the words sinking deep. In the silence, she felt the stirring of resolve, fragile yet fierce. Whatever the cost, she would walk this path on. In doing so, carve a new destiny for the sleeping library and all its dreaming souls. The alcove grew colder, shadows shifting as if alive, and Liora opened her eyes with a newfound clarity. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril, but the choice was hers alone. "Then we begin," she said, voice steady despite the storm within. Not with reckless abandon, but with open eyes and willing heart. Tamsin nodded, a spark of reluctant respect in her gaze. Eleanor's glow brightened just a fraction, a silent blessing. The whispering archivist faded back into the shadows, his warning lingering like a fragile thread woven into the fabric of their resolve. Outside the alcove, the library held its breath, the air thick with the promise of change. Somewhere, deep within the stacks, a book shifted, as if sensing the turning of fate. Liora stepped forward, the weight of the archivist's warning balanced by the fierce hope that had brought her here. The path ahead was dark, tangled with sacrifice and uncertainty, but she would walk it, year by year, dream by dream, until the sleeping library awoke anew. And somewhere, beyond the veil of sleep and shadow, the dreaming souls watched and waited, their silent voices rising in a chorus of hope and longing. The journey was far from over. The pages of fate were still turning. She moved swiftly, her footsteps muffled against the worn wooden floorboards, every sense alert to the shifting currents of magic that whispered warnings through the aisles. The Dream Guardians, those spectral sentinels commanded by the Curator, were closing in, their presence a cold ember glow flickering at the edges of her vision. She ducked beneath a low-hanging shelf, heart pounding, and pressed her back against the faded spines of ancient tomes. The library around her was no longer the quiet sanctuary she had once tentatively embraced. It had transformed into a labyrinthine trap, where every shadow could conceal a threat, and every breath might cost her dearly. There near, a sharp voice hissed beside her. Tamsin materialized from a swirl of mist, her dark curls wild and eyes blazing with fierce urgency. "We can't keep running. We have to fight back, or at least find a way to slow them down." Liora swallowed the knot in her throat. She wanted to believe in the strength Tamsin exuded, that fiery defiance that had always pushed her to daring acts. But each step she took within the dream realms drained her, the years slipping away like grains of sand through trembling fingers. "There has to be a way," Liora whispered, eyes scanning the shifting shelves that seemed to pulse with hidden energy. "We just need to find the right path." Together, they slipped through shadowed corridors where the very air hummed with ancient enchantments. The Dream Guardians prowled nearby, tall, gaunt figures cloaked in swirling darkness, their ember eyes fixed on the fleeing souls. Their footsteps echoed like distant thunder, a relentless drumbeat of impending doom. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared ahead, pale and shimmering like moonlight on still water. Eleanor emerged, her translucent form flowing with ethereal grace. "This way," she said, her voice a gentle murmur that seemed to soothe the fraying edges of Liora's nerves. A passage hidden from the Curator's gaze. "But be warned, it is fragile, and the magic here is old and unpredictable." Liora nodded, gratitude warming her chest. Eleanor reached out, her fingers brushing a shelf that rippled like a disturbed pond, revealing a narrow archway lined with glowing runes. The air smelled faintly of lavender and forgotten memories. As they slipped through, the sounds of pursuit dimmed, replaced by an eerie stillness that pressed on their skin like a cool, damp cloak. The passage twisted and spiraled, the walls alive with flickering light and whispering voices that seemed both inviting and warning. "We're safe for now," Tamsin breathed, though her restless eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. "But the Curator won't give up. Not while we threaten his collection." Liora's gaze fell to the floor, where Milo padded silently beside them, his sleek fur blending into the dimness. The stray cat's eyes glowed suddenly, reflecting a secret knowledge that went beyond ordinary feline wisdom. The cat paused, ears twitching, then turned sharply down a narrow side corridor. Without hesitation, Liora followed, heart pounding as the library's magic seemed to thrum with renewed energy. The shadows around them writhed and whispered, as if alive and watching. "Milo knows the way," Eleanor said softly. "Trust him." The path led them to a vast chamber where rows of ancient tomes towered like silent sentinels. Here the air shimmered with latent power, A place where the very fabric of the library's enchantment felt thin and vulnerable, but the peace was shattered as a low rumbling growl echoed through the stacks. The Dream Guardians had found them, their ember eyes blazing with a fury that promised no mercy. Liora's pulse quickened. She clenched her fists, drawing on every ounce of courage and cunning she possessed. "We won't be caught," she vowed. "Not yet. Not while there's still breath in our bodies and magic in the air." The chase resumed, a desperate dance of shadows and light, of fleeting hope and encroaching despair. Each narrow escape left Liora more exhausted, her remaining years slipping away even faster. Yet with every step, every whispered secret Milo revealed, and every cryptic word from Eleanor and the Archivist's riddles, she grew more determined. The Curator's guardians were relentless, but so was Liora, in the heart of the sleeping library's darkest corners. Amid the shifting dream realms and ancient magic, she fought not just for her own survival, but for the souls bound within the books, and for the fragile hope of breaking the curse that held them all captive. As the chapter closed, Liora's breath came in ragged gasps, shadows coiling around her like a tightening noose. But in her eyes burned a fierce light, a promise that she would not surrender, no matter the cost. The battle was far from over, and the sleeping library still held many secrets yet to be revealed. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to the encroaching dark, stepping forward into the unknown. She sat curled against the stone wall, the dim light from a cracked stained glass window casting fractured colors on the dust motes that danced in the heavy air. The book in her hands throbbed with an unnatural pulse, as if the soul trapped inside it were breathing in tandem with her own faltering heart. Each page she'd turned had stolen a year from her life, the cost undeniable and cruel. She felt it in the hollow ache beneath her ribs, in the slow fading of her strength, and in the shadows gathering behind her eyes. Time was slipping through her fingers like fine sand, and the sanctuary she'd once sought in the sleeping library was becoming a cage tightening around her fragile frame. The weight of it all pressed down relentlessly. Her mind swirled with memories she had tried to bury, the screams in the dark, the slammed doors, the cold loneliness of a home that never felt safe. Here, in the labyrinthine heart of the library, those memories clawed at her, mingling with the whispered voices of the dreaming souls bound in their tomes. Some nights, she thought she could hear them calling, a symphony of silent pleas that echoed in the hollow spaces of her chest. A sudden, sharp knock on the heavy wooden door of the alcove jolted her from the depths of despair. Tamsin's restless figure stepped inside, her dark eyes burning with fierce intensity. "Liora," she said, voice low but urgent, "you can't just sit here and let this library drain you dry. The Curator wants us weak, tethered, broken. We have to fight back." Liora's gaze lifted, meeting Tamsin's unwavering stare. "But every book I open steals more of me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Tamsin's expression softened, the edge in her voice giving way to something almost tender. "I know the cost. I've felt it gnawing at my soul for decades, but giving up means losing everything. We have to find a way to break the bindings, if it means risking everything." The room seemed to pulse with the weight of their shared pain and unspoken fears. As if summoned by the tension, a cool breeze stirred the pages of the book in Liora's lap, and Eleanor's shimmering, ethereal form coalesced silently behind her. Her pale blue robes flowed like water, casting a gentle light that softened the harsh shadows. "Patience," child Eleanor's voice whispered like a sigh through the stillness. "The library's magic is woven with sacrifice, but also with hope. You carry the strength of those who came before you. Trust in the bonds you have forged." Liora closed her eyes, drawing in the fragile comfort of Eleanor's presence. The weight in her chest lightened just enough to breathe. "I want to believe," she murmured, "but I'm scared. What if there's no way out? What if I lose myself completely?" Eleanor's gaze was soft but resolute. "Fear is a shadow you must face, not a chain to bind you. The path ahead is perilous, but you are not alone." The air shifted suddenly, thickening with an oppressive presence. The library around them seemed to darken as a vision flickered to life before Liora's eyes. A dreamscape of shifting, ink-drenched corridors, flickering candlelight, and endless shelves that stretched into shadow. From the darkness emerged the Curator, his tall, gaunt figure cloaked in swirling shadows. His eyes burned like embers, cold and unyielding. "You dare challenge me, child?" His voice was a rasp, like dry leaves scraping stone. "This library is my domain, and its magic will consume you if you persist." Liora's breath caught, heart hammering against the cage of her ribs. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of defiance flickered to life. "I am not your prisoner," she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "The souls deserve freedom. I will fight to the last breath to break your bindings." The Curator's ember eyes blazed brighter, the shadows swirling chaotically around him. "Then prepare to lose yourself to the darkness you so desperately wish to escape." The vision shattered, leaving Liora gasping in the alcove's cold silence. Milo, the sleek black cat, appeared at her feet, his green eyes glowing with quiet understanding. He brushed against her trembling hand, a small but steady anchor to the reality she clung to. She looked up at Tamsin and Eleanor, feeling the weight of their watchful presence. The breaking point had come, the moment when despair threatened to swallow. Her whole and she had to choose whether to surrender or fight. Her fingers tightened around the book, the pulse within syncing with the steady beat of her defiant heart. "We fight," she said, voice low but resolute. "For the souls, for ourselves, for the chance to reclaim what's been stolen." Tamsin smiled, fierce and wild, and Eleanor nodded with quiet pride. Milo's purr filled the hollow space like a promise. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and danger. But Liora knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would not let the library's magic consume her without a battle. The silent voices were counting on her, and she was ready to answer their call. As the first light of dawn filtered weakly through the stained glass window, the library seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the storm that was to come. And Liora, fragile but unbroken, was poised on the edge of a fight that could change everything. With a final steadying breath, she rose to her feet, heart pounding with desperate resolve. The breaking point had passed. Now began the true fight for freedom. The shelves melted into tendrils of smoke and shadow, swirling in a dance of indistinct shapes and whispered voices. I was no longer in one place, but everywhere and nowhere, or caught in the heart of the library's dreaming soul, where the bindings lived. The scent of old paper and dust was replaced by an acrid tang, like burning embers, and the temperature dropped, chilling me to the bone. From the shadows, he appeared, the Curator. His tall, gaunt figure was cloaked in robes that seemed woven from the night itself, flickering and fading like smoke. His eyes glowed faintly, embers smoldering in an endless dark, burning with cold authority and the shadow of a man who had lost everything. I felt the weight of his gaze, a mixture of contempt and sorrow, pressing down on me. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice echoing with a hollow resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of the dreamscape. "This place is mine. The souls, the knowledge, they belong to me." I squared my shoulders, feeling the tremor of fear, but pushing it down. "They're not yours to keep. They deserve freedom." So do I. His laugh was dry, brittle, like cracking parchment. Freedom. Freedom is a luxury for the living. Here, time is a currency, and you've already spent too much. The ground beneath us rippled, and dark forms emerged, dream guardians, their shapes shifting like smoke and shadow, eyes gleaming with unyielding vigilance. They surged forward, and I spun, dodging their grasping hands and ethereal claws. The battle was not just physical, it was a war of wills. Every moment I fought, spectral chains of memory and fear wrapped around me, threatening to suffocate my resolve. But I was not alone. Glimmers of pale blue shimmered near Mialana's translucent form, her eyes gentle yet filled with a fierce wisdom. "Remember why you fight," she whispered, voice like a breeze through pages. "The bonds are strong, but not unbreakable." Beside her, Tamsin's restless figure darted like a flame, dark curls whipping around her intense eyes. "Don't let him cage you," she urged, her voice sharp, a spark of rebellion. "You have the strength he's forgotten." Drawing on their strength, I reached into the core of the dream realm, gathering fragments of light and hope. I spoke aloud the truths I had learned of sacrifice and freedom, of the price of knowledge and the value of compassion. The Curator faltered, his shadowy form flickering like a dying fire. "You don't understand," he hissed, voice cracking. "I sought to preserve, to save, to keep them safe from oblivion." "You trapped them," I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "And yourself?" The library trembled, ancient tomes rattling on shelves as light bent and cracked through the dreamscape. The bindings that had held the souls began to fray, threads snapping like brittle glass. The Curator's eyes widened, a flicker of fear and regret surfacing beneath the embers. In that moment, we were suspended, caught between destruction and salvation, between captivity and release. I felt the cost of every page I had turned, every year I had lost, but also the promise of what might come if we dared to break free. "It's not over," he warned, voice low and urgent. "The library remembers. The magic will fight back." I nodded, heart pounding. "Then we fight back, together or apart. But the souls will be free." As the dreamscape shifted once more, I braced myself for what came next, knowing that the battle for the sleeping library was far from finished, and that the choices I made now would echo through every whispered secret, every dreaming soul, and every fragile hope still left to awaken. But for the first time, I felt the stirrings of possibility crack in the bindings, a spark of light in the endless dark. And that was enough to begin. It shimmered, fractured and unstable, like a cracked mirror catching the flickering light of dying candles. Around us, the shelves groaned under the weight of centuries, their dark wood scarred by the battle we had just waged. The dream realms, once carefully woven and seamless, now bled into one another in jagged tears, exposing raw, aching edges of reality and illusion. I stood facing him, the Curator, his gaunt form swathed in shadowy robes that seemed to absorb the dim light, his eyes glowing faintly like embers, struggling to hold onto warmth. The fight had drained much from both of us, but now, in the uneasy silence, something unspoken hung in the air between us. The tension was not just that of adversaries poised for another clash. It was the fragile thread of something else, something human. "You think this ends with your victory?" His voice was a rasp, a whisper that barely carried. "The library is not simply a cage. It is a sanctuary, a collection, a legacy." I shook my head, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "It's a prison. For you and for every soul trapped inside those books, including you." His eyes flickered, a brief flash of penury. Was it regret? breaking through the ember glow. I sought to protect them, to preserve their knowledge, their essence. But I became bound by my own chains, just as they are. The words hit me harder than any spell or sword. Beneath his imposing shadow, I saw the flicker of a man who had lost himself to his own ambition, trapped in the very magic he wielded. Eleanor's ethereal figure drifted toward us, her pale blue robes flowing like water, her voice soft but firm. The Curator's curse is a mirror of his own heart, torn between preservation and obsession. To break the bindings, forgiveness must be part of the journey. Tamsin, pacing nearby, stopped abruptly, her restless eyes narrowing. Forgiveness, after all this? You expect us to just forgive him? Her voice was sharp, but beneath it lay a trembling uncertainty. I don't know if I can, I admitted, but hatred won't free anyone. Not the souls trapped here, not him, not us. The Curator sagged slightly, the embers in his eyes dimming further. I was a scholar once, like you, seeking knowledge. But I was blinded by my own desire for control. I lost myself to the library's magic, and now I am its prisoner. A silence stretched between us, heavy and full of unspoken histories. The fractures in the library's magic pulsed faintly beneath our feet, threatening collapse, but also hinting at change. We all felt it, that tremor of possibility. Maybe this is our chance, Eleanor whispered, to mend what's broken. Not just the magic, but the hearts bound by it. Tamsin's fierce expression softened minutely. Then we start by listening, by understanding. I took a slow breath, the enormity of what lay ahead settling in my chest. The path forward was unclear and dangerous, but for the first time, it felt like there might be a way to heal not just the library, but ourselves. The shards of broken magic around us shimmered like stars scattered across a dark sky, fragile yet brilliant. And in that moment, beneath the fractured light, I glimpsed a fragile hope, one born from forgiveness, sacrifice, and the quiet strength of those willing to rebuild from the ruins. But even as hope flickered, I knew the journey was far from over. The library's magic was changing, and with it, everything we thought we understood. The bonds that held the souls, the curse that imprisoned us, the very fabric of dreams and reality, all was shifting beneath our feet. And somewhere in the shadows, the Curator's legacy lingered. A reminder that even in redemption, the price of knowledge and power was never truly paid in full. I turned away from him, my gaze sweeping across the fractured shelves, the fading embers of enchantment glowing faintly in my hands. The weight of sacrifice settled deep within me, but so did a quiet determination. The library was no longer just a prison. It was becoming something newer, fragile sanctuary born from the cracks. And I would be its guardian. As I stepped forward, the shadows seemed to breathe with me. The dream realms whispered, waiting for what would come next. The fractures were not the end. Every surface shimmered with a tenuous golden light, as if the very stones themselves held their breath in anticipation. Liora stood before the ancient altar, clutching the worn pages of a grimoire she'd found hidden deep within the forgotten stacks. The ritual to sever the curse binding the dreaming souls was etched across these fragile leaves, words humming with power both terrible and beautiful. Her hands trembled as she began the incantation, voice low but steady. The air thickened with magic. The scent of old parchment and something like ozone filled her senses. Around her, the library seemed to pulse, breathing in unison with her own heartbeat. Chains of shimmering light wrapped the countless souls trapped within the books, their whispers rising to a crescendo, a chorus of yearning and hope. With each phrase spoken, the chains began to loosen, glowing threads unraveling in bursts of radiant energy. The dreaming souls stirred, their forms shifting from vague shadows to clearer shapes, faces alight with the promise of freedom. Liora's breath caught in her throat. She felt a surge of triumph mingled with profound sorrow. Suddenly, a presence darkened the periphery of the chamber. The Curator emerged from the shadows, his gaunt figure cloaked in tattered robes, eyes glowing faintly like embers, his mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "You believe you can undo what I have wrought," he hissed, voice echoing with the weight of centuries. Liora met his gaze unflinchingly. "The cost of your obsession is too high. No soul deserves to be a prisoner. Not here, not ever." He lunged forward, a swirl of shadows and malice, but the light from the ritual flared, pushing him back. His form flickered, the embers in his eyes dimming as the curse unraveled thread by thread. "You will regret this," he whispered, fading like smoke caught in a sudden breeze. As the last bindings shattered, a wave of release swept through the library. Souls once trapped in endless slumber awoke, their voices rising in a symphony of gratitude and grief. Tamsin appeared beside Liora, her eyes shining with tears and fierce relief. She pulled Liora into a tight embrace, their shared pain and hope intertwining in that fragile moment. "We're free," Tamsin breathed, voice trembling. "But what of you?" Liora's heart ached. She could feel the years stolen from her slipping away, a heavy toll exacted by the magic of the library. She staggered, collapsing onto the cold stone floor. Milo, her constant companion, padded silently to her side, curling protectively against her pale cheek. The library itself seemed to sigh, the oppressive weight lifting, replaced by a gentle warmth. The knowledge and magic that had once imprisoned now promised sanctuary. Yet in that newfound freedom, Liora understood the undeniable truth. Sacrifice was the price of hope. She closed her eyes, the quiet flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the ancient walls, and whispered a vow to guard this place not as a jailer, but as a protector. The library had awoken, and so had she, forever changed but resolute. Outside, the world waited, but inside the sleeping library, a new dawn had begun, a delicate balance between sacrifice and freedom, knowledge and compassion, dreams and reality, and Liora was ready to face whatever came next. It was a new dawn, not just outside the ancient walls, but within them, a dawn that shimmered with the soft glow of change. Liora stood at the center of the library's heart, a place once burdened by silence and shadows, now alive with gentle light and the soft murmur of dreams finally free. The curse that had bound the souls within these books, that had exacted a toll so cruel and unyielding, was lifted. The air no longer felt thick with the weight of sacrifice, but danced lightly with promise. It was as if the library itself breathed anew, its endless shelves no longer a prison but a sanctuary. Liora's eyes traced the golden glow that pulsed gently through the stacks, each tome humming with a peaceful vitality that had been absent for decades, perhaps centuries. She felt the lingering echo of every soul once trapped, here, no longer silent, no longer dormant. Their voices whispered softly, no longer cries for freedom, but songs of hope and renewal. It was a transformation that filled Liora with a profound mix of awe and solemn responsibility. A shimmer beside her caught her attention. Eleanor's ethereal form took shape smoothly from the ambient light, her pale blue robes flowing like water stirred by a gentle breeze. The mentor spirit's eyes held a depth of wisdom and a quiet joy that mirrored Liora's own burgeoning hope. "The library breathes with balance now," Eleanor said, her voice a melodic murmur that seemed woven from the very air. "The sacrifice of old has been replaced by a harmony of respect and freedom. But with this change comes responsibility. You must be its guardian, Liora, protector of the knowledge and the souls who seek it, without the cost that once chained them." Liora nodded, the weight of Eleanor's words settling into her bones. She had come here running from a past too loud and suffocating, seeking refuge in a place that demanded too much. Now she stood ready to protect that refuge for others, to guard it with the fierce tenderness born of her own journey. From the shadows of the shelves, Tamsin emerged. Her dark curls framed a face softened by a calm that had once seemed impossible. No longer restless, no longer bound by the library's cruel enchantment, she moved with a grace that spoke of liberation. Their eyes met across the aisles. A silent acknowledgement passing between them, shared history of pain, rebellion, and ultimate survival. "It's different now," Tamsin said quietly, her voice steady. "We don't have to fight just to be free. We can live." Liora smiled, a bittersweet warmth filling her chest. "Yes, and we'll make sure it stays that way." At her feet, Milo stretched and curled into a soft ball, purring with a contentment that seemed to echo the library's new pulse. The stray cat, once a simple companion, had revealed itself as a subtle guardian of the Magican, anchor to the world beyond these walls. His bright eyes caught the morning light, glinting with a knowing spark. The sounds of the library had changed too. No longer the oppressive silence that had pressed against her skin. The air was alive with the soft rustling of pages, turning, whispered stories, spoken in voices both ancient and new. It was a symphony of life, knowledge, and dreams thriving in delicate balance. Liora walked slowly through the aisles, her fingers brushing the spines of countless books, each a sleeping soul finally at peace. She could feel the magic now as a gentle current flowing beneath her skin, a promise that knowledge need not come at the cost of life, that sanctuary could be real. But even as hope blossomed within her, a quiet question lingered: how to maintain this fragile balance. The power that had once corrupted the Curator still lingered in the shadows, a reminder of the dangers inherent in the hoarding and misuse of knowledge. Could she protect the library from such darkness without becoming a prison's warden herself? She stopped before a tall shelf, the morning light casting long, warm shadows that danced like living things. The library was awake, alive in ways she had never dared imagine, and she was ready to guard, to learn, and to welcome those seeking refuge within these walls. Outside, the city stirred with the first breath of dawn, but within the sleeping library, a new day was truly beginning. A day where dreams were free to breathe, where knowledge was a gift, and where Liora's story was only just unfolding. And as she turned toward the vast horizon of books and souls, a quiet thrill ran through her veins, a whisper of the countless stories yet to be told, the lives yet to be touched, and the sanctuary she would fiercely protect. The sleeping library had awoken, and so had she. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like freedom. Liora's steps echoed softly against the polished stone floor as she moved between towering shelves heavy with books, their spines humming faintly under her touch. Each tome was a world, a soul, a slumbering memory waiting to be honored rather than exploited. For a long moment, she stood still, her pale fingers tracing the gold-embossed title of a volume that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat beneath her skin. The weight of what she had endured, the years lost, the souls she had met, the battles fought settled around her like a mantle. Yet beneath it all, a steady resolve took root. Eleanor's pale blue form shimmered into view beside her, the gentle guardian spirits, translucent robes flowing like liquid moonlight. "The library has chosen you," she said softly, her voice a soothing melody that seemed to weave through the dust motes, dancing in the sunbeams. "Not as a prisoner, but as a protector. The magic must be tempered with compassion." Liora nodded, the words echoing a truth she had come to understand through hardship and heartache. "I will keep them safe," she promised, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath. "No one else should lose what I lost. No one should pay with their years." Together, they began the delicate work of weaving new enchantments through the library's vast magic. Eleanor's hands moved like wisps of smoke, tracing runes of protection and balance. Liora added her own intent, hope, empathy, guardianship, binding the spells with care. The shelves glowed softly, the books settling into a peaceful slumber, no longer a prison but a sanctuary. Milo, the sleek black cat who had silently followed Liora since her first hesitant steps into the library, wound between her ankles. His bright eyes flickered with unspoken knowledge, a living talisman grounding Liora in the waking world. As she crouched to stroke his fur, a small purr rumbled through him, a reminder that even amid magic and dreams, life persisted. The hours slipped by unnoticed as Liora walked the labyrinth of aisles, her fingers brushing against the spines of books that once held captive souls. Each one now a quiet friend, freed from the torment of endless dreaming. Her heart swelled with a bittersweet ache, joy, mingled with loss, hope, tempered by the cost she bore. At last, the fading light of twilight spilled through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the marble floor. Liora ascended the spiral staircase to the highest chamber of the library's tower, a place where the boundary between dreams and reality felt thinnest. From the lofty vantage point, she gazed out over the sleeping city, its rooftops bathed in the soft glow of dusk. The library pulsed beneath her feet, a living entity breathing with quiet power. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of her new role settle firmly on her shoulders. "I will watch over you," she whispered to the library, to the souls within, and to herself. "I will guard your secrets and your dreams. This sanctuary will be a refuge, not a cage." A sudden breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it the faintest scent of jasmine and old paper. Milo leaped onto the windowsill, tail flicking with alertness. Liora smiled despite the solemnity of the moment. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt truly anchored, rooted, not in fear or flight, but in purpose. As the stars began to prick the velvet sky, the sleeping library awoke not as a prison, but as a beacon. And Liora, its new guardian, stood watch, ready for whatever dreams or dangers the night might bring. And yet, even in this quiet triumph, a question lingered in her mind. How would she balance the protection of this place with the relentless demands of those who would seek its refuge? The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Liora was not alone. She carried the library's legacy, and with it, the fragile hope of a future reclaimed. The night deepened, and somewhere within the stacks, a book stirred. It was no longer the dim, dusty glow of a forgotten place, but a vibrant, living illumination that seemed to breathe through the stained glass windows and curl around the ancient shelves like a gentle tide. I stood at the center of this renewed sanctuary, feeling the pulse of magic thrumming beneath the floorboards and whispering through the air. The sleeping library, once a cage of silent voices and stolen years, had transformed into something reborn, a place of refuge, healing, and hope. I brushed a stray lock of dark hair from my face, my pale skin tingling with the warmth that filled the room. The shadows had receded, replaced by a kaleidoscope of colors dancing across the stone floor. Every book around me seemed to hum softly, their dreaming souls no longer trapped in torment but at peace, their voices harmonizing in a gentle chorus that echoed through the stacks. Liora, a familiar voice whispered, delicate as the rustle of autumn leaves. I turned to see Eleanor's shimmering form materialize beside me, her pale blue robes flowing like liquid light. Her eyes, once clouded with melancholy, now held a serene wisdom that comforted and steadied me. "The library listens to you now," she said, her voice weaving through the air like a soft melody. "You have mended what was broken, but remember the balance you hold is fragile. Knowledge and magic demand respect, not sacrifice without end." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within me. The journey had changed me irrevocably. I was no longer the frightened runaway who had stumbled through that creaking door months ago. I was the guardian now, protector of these dreaming souls and the mysteries they kept. As I absorbed her counsel, a sudden movement caught my eye. Tamsin stepped forward, her dark curls catching the light, her intense eyes softened by the freedom she now embraced. There was a grace to her that hadn't been there before, a lightness in her step as if the years stolen from her had been returned in spirit, if not in time. "I never thought I'd see this day," she said quietly, her voice edged with bittersweet relief. "Thank you, Liora, for fighting, for believing." Her gaze lingered on the shelves, then met mine with a fierce, hopeful spark. "I'll carry this freedom beyond these walls." Her words filled me with a profound sense of responsibility. The library was no longer just a refuge for lost souls. It was a beacon for those seeking solace, knowledge, and healing. And I was its keeper. Beneath my feet, a soft purring stirred my attention. Milo, the stray cat who had silently accompanied me since the beginning, wound between my legs and settled at my feet. His sleek black fur gleamed in the shifting light, and his emerald eyes reflected the library's magic, a bridge between the waking world and the dream realms. I knelt to stroke his fur, feeling a comforting warmth radiate from him. In that simple act, I found a grounding presence, a reminder that while the library was a place of magic and mystery, it was also a home. The echoes of the past lingered in the corners of the library, memories of fear, loss, and sacrifice. But here, in this renewed sanctuary, they were tempered by the promise of the future. I could feel it in the air, a shimmering thread of hope weaving through the shelves, binding us all together. And as I stood among the whispering books, I made a silent vow to guard this place with all that I was, to honor the sacrifices made, and to ensure that the sleeping library would never again be a prison, but a place where dreams awaken, knowledge flourishes, and healing begins. The journey had been long and fraught with peril, but as the light danced around me and the voices of the dreaming souls rose in quiet harmony, I knew that this was only the beginning. The sleeping library awoke, not just in magic, but in spirit, and I was ready to guide its new dawn. And so, with Milo at my side and the library's heart beating steady beneath my hands, I stepped forward into the promise of what was to come, a future forged from the echoes of the past, bright with the hope of endless tomorrows. But even as peace settled over the stacks, I couldn't help but wonder what new stories would find their way here, what lost souls would seek refuge within these walls, and what sacrifices might still be demanded in the name of knowledge and freedom. The library was alive again, and its story was far from over. Tamsin stood at the center of the cavernous chamber, her dark curls tangled around her face, eyes blazing with determination even as her hands trembled slightly. They were wrapped in threads of shimmering silver-blue magic, the bindings that had held her captive for decades within the dreaming tomes. Tonight was the night she would challenge that captivity. Liora stood a few steps behind her, clutching the fragile volume that had revealed the incantation needed to undo the bindings. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the high shelves that towered like ancient sentinels. Eleanor's ethereal form hovered nearby, her pale blue glow steady and serene. Even the oppressive presence of the Curator seemed to waver in the charged atmosphere, though his shadowy figure lingered at the edges of the chamber, silent but watchful. "Are you ready?" Liora asked softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Tamsin's gaze met hers, fierce yet tempered with a hint of vulnerability. "I've waited too long," she said. "I'm ready." Taking a deep breath, Tamsin began to chant, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. The incantation was ancient, woven from threads of forgotten languages and the raw essence of the library's magic. As her voice rose and fell, the shimmering bindings tightened for a moment, as if resisting her will, before beginning to unravel like strands of gossamer caught in a breeze. The chamber thrummed with energy. The very air seemed alive, vibrating with the tension between imprisonment and release. Liora felt a tug at her own spirit, a pulse of the library's enchantment reaching for her as if warning her of the cost. Suddenly, the bindings snapped, sending a cascade of luminous fragments into the air. They swirled like fireflies caught in a gentle storm before dissolving into nothingness. Tamsin collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but the light in her eyes shone brighter than ever the light of freedom. Around them, the library seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight that had settled for so long lifting in a whisper of released sighs. The silence that followed was heavy but filled with possibility. Liora stepped forward, kneeling beside Tamsin. "You did it," she said, reaching out to grasp her hand. Tamsin smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and joy. "I'm free, but it's strange. At all this time, the world outside feels like a place I barely remember." "You're not alone," Liora assured her. "We'll figure it out, together." Eleanor's shimmering form drifted closer, her voice gentle and full of warmth. "Your courage has undone a great burden. The library's magic will never be the same." The Curator, his gaunt face partially concealed beneath shadowy robes, stepped forward with a slow, deliberate grace. His eyes, glowing faintly like embers, held a flicker of something almost human. "You have disrupted the balance," he said, voice low and echoing. "But perhaps this change is inevitable." Tamsin rose to her feet, steady now, the fire of defiance rekindled. The cost of hoarding knowledge without compassion is too great. The library should be a sanctuary, not a prison. The Curator regarded her silently for a long moment before retreating into the shadows. The battle was far from over, but a new chapter had begun. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of a corner alcove, Liora and Tamsin sat side by side beneath the gentle glow of a flickering candle. The tension that had always defined their relationship softened into something more fragile and profound. "What will you do now?" Liora asked, her voice tentative. Tamsin looked out beyond the towering shelves, her gaze distant yet hopeful. "I don't know. The years lost are gone forever, and the future is uncertain. But I want to live it on my own terms, not confined by magic or fear." Liora nodded, understanding the weight carried in those words. "You have a place here, if you want it." "Thank you," Tamsin said softly, squeezing Liora's hand. "For everything." As dawn began to filter through the stained glass windows, casting pale gold light on the worn floorboards, Tamsin approached the ancient doors of the library. She paused, turning back to glance at Liora, who stood silently watching. There was hope in her eyes, mingled with the sorrow of parting. "Goodbye, Liora," she said, voice steady but carrying the unspoken promise of return. "Goodbye, Tamsin," Liora replied, her heart tight with a mixture of hope and loss. Tamsin stepped into the misty morning, the world beyond both daunting and inviting. The library behind her was no longer a cage, but a place reborn, transformed by sacrifice and the courage to change. Liora watched until the figure faded into the rising light, the silence around her filled with the echoes of what had been and the fragile promise of what was yet to come. She turned back inside, the weight of her new role settling over her like a mantle. The sleeping library was awake now, ready to welcome those seeking refuge, knowledge, and healing under her watchful eye. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the future felt wide open, a dreamscape waiting to be explored. Pale blue light shimmered through the high windows, filtering like delicate silk across the worn wooden floors and endless shelves. Eleanor's form hovered beside me, translucent and fragile, her flowing robes rippling with the faintest hint of a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. I sat on the low bench beneath the towering stacks, my hands folded tightly in my lap, my breath caught somewhere between grief and a tentative hope. Liora Eleanor's voice was a whisper, yet it filled the vast space with a gentle insistence. "You have come far, braver than you know. The library, it is no longer just a place of bindings and sacrifice. It is becoming something new, something alive because of you." I swallowed hard, the weight of her gaze settling on me like a mantle. But how? How do I keep it safe without becoming like the Curator? How do I protect the souls without trapping them again? Her shimmering eyes softened, reflecting the flickering light like pools of still water. "Compassion, Liora, not control. The magic here is old and wild, but it listens to the heart. You must guide it with kindness, with understanding. The bindings that once held the souls captive can be transformed and broken by force, but by love and respect." I wanted to believe her, but the ache in my chest reminded me of all the years lost, all the pain endured. It feels impossible, like I'm standing on the edge of a vast chasm, unsure if I can leap. Eleanor's form drifted closer, her presence warmed despite the ethereal chill. "You are not alone. The souls, the library, they are part of you now, as much as you are of them. And Milo will watch over you, as he has always done." A faint rustle caught my attention. Milo, the stray cat with eyes too knowing for any ordinary creature, padded silently into the room, curling beside my feet. His gaze met mine, steady and calm, an anchor in the shifting tides. "Remember," Eleanor whispered, "the library awakens only when it is cared for with an open heart. It will test you, challenge you, but it will also nurture you." The light around her began to waver, flickering like a candle about to go out. I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing through the space where her hand once was. A soft, shimmering warmth lingered where she had touched me. "I must go now," she said, voice fading like a song trailing into silence. "But I will always be with you, in every whispered secret and every dream that the library holds." Eleanor's form dissolved slowly into a cascade of sparkling motes, drifting upward like fireflies caught in a gentle breeze. The library seemed to exhale, the shadows retreating slightly, as if mourning and celebrating all at once. Left alone, the silence was profound but not empty. My hand found a glowing tome on the bench beside me, its cover warm and humming softly. The pulse of the library's magic thrummed beneath my fingertips, steady and alive. I stood slowly, the weight of responsibility settling upon me, heavy but not crushing. Outside the tall windows, the first light of dawn spilled in, casting long shadows and painting the shelves with gold and amber hues. The library was waking, not as a prison, but as a sanctuary. I caught Milo's gaze and smiled faintly, a quiet promise forming in the depths of my heart. I would carry the legacy Eleanor entrusted to me. I would guard this place with all the compassion and wisdom I could muster. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was lit by hope. And as the library stirred around me, alive with endless stories and sleeping souls, I felt the fragile but fierce beginnings of renewal. But even as warmth filled the air, a whisper of unease lingered just beneath the surfacer, reminder that the balance I must keep would not be easily won. The library had awakened, and so had the trials that would come with it. I took a deep breath, my fingers curling around the spine of a book that seemed to hum with possibility. The journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. And so, beneath the pale light of dawn, the sleeping library awoke, and I stood ready to guide it into the future. The shadows would come again. I knew that much, but I would face them with an open heart and a fierce, fragile hope. For the library, for the souls within, and for myself. The end of Eleanor's story was the beginning of mine, and the library's song continued, eternal and ever-changing, waiting for the next chapter to be written. With that thought, I stepped forward into the awakening light. The promise of a new dawn stretched out before me like a fragile, glowing thread to follow. The heart of the sleeping library, once a place of shadows and whispered fears, now thrummed with a soft, steady pulsar rhythm born of renewal and delicate balance. I stood alone amidst towering stacks, their spines worn and weathered, each book a vessel of a sleeping soul. Their dreams no longer chains, but threads weaving a tapestry of hope. From the depths of the shadows, a faint ember glow flickered, an echo of the Curator's presence, lingering like a ghost tethered to the magic he once sought to control. His gaunt figure, cloaked in robes darker than midnight, appeared at the edge of my vision, eyes glowing faintly like smoldering coals. I did not flinch. Instead, I welcomed the memory, the legacy of a man consumed by ambition and the price he paid for it. The Curator had been a scholar, much like me once was hungry for knowledge, desperate to escape the confines of mortality. But in his quest for immortality, he became a prisoner of his own desire, binding himself and countless souls within these walls. I could feel the weight of his tragedy, a cautionary tale etched into the very fabric of the library. As I contemplated his fate, a gentle presence emerged beside me. Her ethereal form shimmered with a pale blue light, robes flowing like liquid moonlight. She regarded me with eyes full of ancient sorrow and enduring wisdom. "You carry a heavy burden, Liora," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of parchment. The Curator's ambition was his undoing, but his story need not be yours. Guard this place with compassion. Let knowledge be a light, not a chain. Her words settled over me like a bomb. The sacrifices of the past weighed on me, but I felt a burgeoning resolve to honor them by choosing a different path, one where the magic of the library would nurture rather than imprison. Around us, the walls pulsed faintly, alive with a renewed magic. The oppressive darkness receded, replaced by a subtle luminescence that bathed the shelves in a warm glow. It was as if the library itself breathed anew, whispering secrets not of captivity but of sanctuary. I moved through the aisles, fingers brushing over spines that held dreams and memories. Each book was a story, a soul yearning for freedom, and now I was their guardian, no longer a frightened runaway, but a protector who understood the delicate balance between sacrifice and salvation. Pausing before a tome once bound by the Curator's curse, I closed it gently, the leather cool beneath my touch. The familiar ache of lost years echoed within me, but alongside it burned a fierce determination. I would not let the library become a prison again. I would safeguard its knowledge with empathy, ensuring that the cost was never paid in silence or despair. Outside, the city slumbered, unaware beneath a blanket of stars. But here, within these ancient walls, a new chapter was beginning. The sleeping library awoke, its magic transformed, its heart open. And I stood watch, ready to guide those who would come seeking refuge, knowledge, and healing. The lessons of the Curator's legacy were etched in my soul, a reminder that power without compassion is a cage, and that true guardianship is an act of love and sacrifice. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and the echoes of the past, but for the first time, I felt a quiet hope, an ember of light in the lingering darkness. "This is our home now," I whispered to the sleeping souls around me. "And here, you will dream freely." The library seemed to answer with a soft sigh, a promise woven into the very air, a promise of renewal, resilience, and the delicate, enduring power of compassion. The air was no longer heavy with silence or the scent of forgotten years, but hummed with a gentle, vibrant magic that breathed life into every corner of the vast sanctuary. I stood at the grand archway, my fingers brushing against the smooth spines of books that now shimmered softly. Their dreaming souls stirred not by imprisonment, but by newfound hope. The library had awakened. The transformation was subtle at first, the faint pulse of light beneath the cracked leather covers, the soft murmurings of voices no longer trapped in despair, but whispering stories of renewal. I could feel it in the air, a warmth that wrapped around me like a comforting cloak, a promise that this place was no longer a cage, but a refuge, a place where knowledge and magic were shared freely, not hoarded. Eleanor appeared beside me, her ethereal form shimmering with a pale blue glow that drifted like mist. Her face bore the gentle melancholy of all who had suffered long yet carried hope still. "You have done what many could not," she said softly, her voice weaving through the light like a tender breeze. "The library breathes because you dared to dream beyond the bindings." I met her gaze, feeling the weight of her farewell in the quiet between us. "I will guard it," I promised, the words feeling both heavy and freeing, not as a prisoner, but as a protector. Her smile was a fleeting thing, like the last star before dawn. "Then I can rest," she whispered, her form dissolving into a cascade of shimmering motes that danced upward, scattering into the morning light. The library seemed to sigh in relief, the shadows retreating as warmth filled the space. From the farthest stacks, a portal shimmered open, and through it stepped Tamsin. Her dark curls framed a face alight with fierce freedom and gratitude. She glanced at me, eyes blazing with the fire of release, and with a nod, she turned away, crossing the threshold into the waking world. Her departure was a bittersweet echo of sacrifice and new beginnings, a reminder of the price paid for this dawn. I watched her go, a pang of loss mingled with pride stirring within me. The library was no longer just mine or the souls trapped within its pages. It was a living, breathing entity, a beacon for those who sought refuge from the storm outside. In the quiet alcove near the entrance, Milo settled into my lap, his fur warm and soft against my skin, his eyes glimmering with an inscrutable knowing. Met mine, grounding me to this moment, this fragile balance between dream and reality. His steady purr was a balm to my restless heart, a reminder that even in magic, there is comfort to be found in small, steady things. I arose, the weight of my new role settling around me like a mantle. The library awaited, alive and vibrant, no longer shadowed by curse or captivity, but radiant with possibility. I would guide those who came seeking knowledge, healing, and sanctuary. I would protect the fragile boundary between dreams and waking, sacrifice and freedom. Because this library, this place of whispered secrets and dreaming souls, was my home now, and I would keep its heart beating for as long as I could. Outside, the city still stirred awake, the world turning as it always had. But here, within these walls, a new chapter was beginning, one written not in loss, but in hope. And as the first visitors tentatively crossed the threshold, I smiled, ready to welcome them into the sleeping library that had finally awoken. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the path ahead was lit by more than just the fading embers of sacrifice. It was lit by the enduring light of connection, renewal, and the unyielding courage of a girl who dared to turn the page.